The photo shouldn't have been there. Ryan Cole's hands froze above the keyboard as the CEO's computer screen flickered to life, revealing not spreadsheets or corporate emails, but a woman he didn't recognize, barefoot by a lake, laughing at nothing, achingly human. Veronica Sloan stood 3 feet behind him, the silence stretched like a wire about to snap. Then came the question that would unravel everything. Do you think I'm beautiful? In that moment, a single father who'd spent years invisible was about to discover that one honest answer could shatter the walls between two impossibly different worlds. If you want to see where this forbidden honesty leads, stay with me until the very end. And please, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. Ryan Cole had learned long ago that invisibility was a survival skill. At 34, he'd perfected the art of moving through spaces without leaving an impression. Head down, toolkit in hand, fixing problems that people with corner offices would never acknowledge existed. In the gleaming 50-story tower of Sloan Industries, he was a number on a work order, a blur in a navy blue polo shirt, someone you'd pass in the hallway and forget before the elevator doors closed. That was fine by him. Invisible meant safe. Invisible meant no questions about why he left exactly at 5 o'clock, no judgment about the crayon drawing of a sunshine yellow giraffe taped inside his toolbox, no prying into the carefully constructed life he'd built from the ruins of the one that fell apart 3 years ago. His daughter Emma needed him predictable, steady, present. Being invisible at work meant he could be everything at home. Ticket 7743 executive level, the dispatch message read that Tuesday morning. System crash, CEO's office, priority 1. Ryan stared at his phone screen, coffee halfway to his lips. The CEO's office, 51st floor, the place where decisions that affected thousands of lives were made by a woman whose face appeared on magazine covers and business school case studies. Veronica Sloan, the 29-year-old prodigy who'd inherited a struggling manufacturing company and transformed it into a global technology empire in less than 5 years. Ryan had never been above the 35th floor. You good with this one? Marcus, his supervisor, appeared beside his desk with an expression that suggested the question wasn't really a question. Chang called in sick, and Davidson's on that server migration. You're the only senior tech available. Yeah, I've got it. Ryan set down his coffee, checking his watch out of habit. 8:47 a.m. If he moved efficiently, he could handle this and still make it to 3 other tickets before lunch, still leave on time to pick Emma up from aftercare, still maintain the careful rhythm that kept their small world spinning. Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. Don't let the top floor intimidate you. They put their pants on one leg at a time, same as everyone else. Ryan doubted Veronica Sloan put on pants the same way he did, wrestling with a 4-year-old who'd hidden his work badge in her toy kitchen while explaining why she couldn't have chocolate cereal for breakfast. But he nodded anyway. The elevator ride to the 51st floor took 43 seconds. Ryan counted them, watching the numbers climb, feeling the subtle pressure change as he rose higher into the kingdom of people who shaped the world instead of just surviving in it. The doors opened onto a different universe, where the IT department occupied a cramped corner of the 8th floor with flickering fluorescent lights and carpet tiles that had been beige sometime in the previous century. The executive level was all glass and clean lines and air that somehow smelled expensive. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city sprawling below like a circuit board, all ordered patterns and glittering connections. A woman in a sharp charcoal suit looked up from a desk that probably cost more than Ryan's car. Her expression managed to be both professionally pleasant and utterly dismissive in the same instant. Your IT? She glanced at the badge clipped to his belt, as if confirming he belonged to a species she'd heard about but rarely encountered. Yes, ma'am? Here for the system crash. Miss Sloan is in a video conference that should end in approximately 8 minutes. You'll wait here. She gestured to a leather chair positioned near the windows. Not an invitation, an instruction. Ryan sat, toolkit balanced on his knees, trying not to think about how the chair alone probably represented a month of his salary. Through the frosted glass walls of the inner office, he could see a silhouette moving, pacing, gesturing. Even in shadow, Veronica Sloan radiated the kind of controlled intensity that made the air feel charged. He checked his phone. One new message from Emma's preschool. Reminder, Fall Festival this Friday, 3 to 5 p.m. We hope to see you there. Ryan's thumb hovered over the calendar app. Friday. He'd already requested the afternoon off 2 weeks ago, had rearranged his entire schedule, had promised Emma he'd be there to see her perform in the Harvest play. She'd been practicing her one line, "The pumpkins are ready," every night before bed with such fierce concentration that it made his chest ache. The frosted glass door opened. "And I don't accept industry standard as an excuse for mediocrity, Richard. If that's the best your team can offer, perhaps we need to reconsider the partnership entirely." The voice was crisp, precisely articulated, with an edge that could cut through excuses like a laser through paper. Veronica Sloane stepped into the reception area, and Ryan understood immediately why people wrote articles about her presence. She was tall, maybe 5'10", in the black heels that clicked against the polished floor with metronomic precision. Dark hair pulled back so severely it looked painful. A charcoal suit that probably had a name brand he wouldn't recognize. Features that were striking rather than conventionally beautiful. Strong jaw, sharp cheekbones, eyes that assessed everything like a general surveying a battlefield. She was looking at her phone, still talking into a wireless earpiece. "I want the revised projections by noon tomorrow, not end of week. Noon. Yes. Goodbye, Richard." She tapped the earpiece and finally looked up. For exactly 2 seconds, her gaze passed over Ryan with the same impersonal efficiency she'd probably used on the furniture. Then her attention shifted to her assistant. "Catherine, the legal briefing?" "Moved to 2 o'clock. Your lunch with Senator Morrison was rescheduled to next Tuesday. His office called this morning. And Ite is here for your computer." Only then did Veronica's eyes return to Ryan, this time actually registering his presence. "How long will this take?" Ryan stood, instinctively straightening his shoulders. "Depends on the issue, ma'am. Could be 5 minutes. Could be an hour." "Make it 5 minutes." She turned toward her office, clearly expecting him to follow. "I'll do my best, but if it's a hardware failure..." "It's not. The system crashed during a presentation, and now it won't boot past the login screen. I have another call in 20 minutes and a board meeting at 11 that requires those files." Ryan followed her into an office that was somehow both massive and austere. Minimal furniture, no personal photographs, no decorative objects except a single piece of abstract sculpture that looked like frozen chrome lightning. The desk faced the windows, offering a view that made the entire city look like something she owned. "Here," Veronica gestured to the computer setup. 3 large monitors arranged in a precise arc, a sleek tower humming quietly beneath the desk. "I need everything on the primary drive accessible within 15 minutes. "Yes, ma'am." Ryan set his toolkit down, already running through diagnostic possibilities. "Did you get any error messages before it crashed?" "No. One moment I was presenting Q3 projections, the next the entire system froze. I had to force a shutdown." Ryan knelt beside the tower, checking connections. "And when you tried to restart?" "Login screen appears, I enter credentials, then nothing. Just a black screen with the cursor. No." Classic symptoms. Could be corrupted system files. Could be a failed update. Could be malware if she'd clicked something suspicious, though he couldn't imagine this woman clicking anything without thoroughly vetting it first. "I'm going to boot into safe mode and run some diagnostics," Ryan said, more to himself than to her. He was already slipping into the focused state where problems became puzzles, where the world narrowed to circuits and code, and the satisfying click of things falling back into order. Behind him, Veronica's heels clicked against the floor. She'd moved to stand at the windows, phone in hand, radiating impatience like heat. Ryan worked quickly, fingers moving across the keyboard with practiced efficiency. Safe mode loaded without issue. Good sign. He opened the event viewer, scanning through the cascade of logs and errors, looking for the moment everything went wrong. There. A driver conflict, probably triggered by an automatic update that happened during her presentation. Sloppy, but fixable. He pulled up the device manager, preparing to roll back the problematic driver. "How much longer?" Veronica's voice came from somewhere behind him, tight with controlled frustration. "Just a few more minutes?" "I found the issue. It's a driver conflict. I don't need the technical explanation. I need it working." Ryan bit back a response. People like her didn't want to understand systems. They just wanted them to function invisibly, perfectly, constantly. He was used to it. He was the plumber of the digital age, only noticed when something broke. He rolled back the driver, watching the progress bar crawl across the screen. 80%, 90%, complete. Okay, restarting now. This should... The system began its shutdown sequence, and Ryan stood up, stepping back to give the computer space to do its thing, to prove he'd solved the problem, to let him return to invisibility. The monitors went dark. The tower hummed through its restart. And then the login screen appeared, exactly as it should. There, Ryan said, gesturing to the keyboard. If you enter your credentials, everything should load normally now. Veronica moved past him, bringing with her a subtle scent of something expensive. Not perfume exactly, just the smell of a life lived at altitude. She typed her password with quick, decisive keystrokes. The system logged in. The desktop began to load. And then, for exactly 3 seconds that felt like 3 hours, the primary monitor displayed not the corporate background with the Sloan Industries logo, not the carefully organized array of folders and applications, but a photograph. A woman by a lake, sitting on a dock with her feet dangling in the water, wearing jeans and a faded college sweatshirt, hair loose and wind-tangled, face turned toward the camera with an expression of such unguarded joy that it looked like laughter caught mid-flight. It was Veronica Sloan, and it was absolutely not Veronica Sloan. The image disappeared as quickly as it had appeared, replaced by the expected corporate desktop. Some quirk of the restart process. Some cached file that briefly surfaced before the system fully loaded. A glitch. A ghost in the machine. Ryan's brain screamed at him to pretend he hadn't seen it, to maintain the fiction of invisibility, to be the professional who doesn't notice things above his pay grade. But his face, his stupid, honest face, had already reacted. His eyes had widened fractionally. His breath had caught. And when he glanced at Veronica, he found her watching him with an expression he couldn't read. The silence stretched. Catherine's voice drifted in from the reception area, talking to someone on the phone. The city hummed beyond the windows, indifferent. Ryan cleared his throat. Everything looks functional now. Your files should all be accessible. If you have any other issues, just submit another ticket and... You saw it. Not a question. A statement, flat and certain. Ryan felt heat crawl up his neck. Ma'am, I apologize. It was just a brief flash during the boot sequence. I didn't mean to... I'm aware you didn't mean to. Veronica's voice had changed somehow. Still controlled, still precise, but with something underneath it he couldn't identify. That photo shouldn't be on this system. I thought I'd deleted it months ago. I can make sure it's permanently removed if you'd like. Sometimes files persist in temporary folders, even after deletion, and that's not what I asked. Ryan blinked. You didn't ask me anything, ma'am. Veronica turned away from the monitors to face him fully. In the morning light streaming through the windows, her features looked different than they had in the reception area, less like a magazine cover, more like a person carrying something heavy. That photograph was taken 2 years ago, she said quietly. Before my father died. Before I took over the company. Before any of this. She gestured vaguely at the office, the view, perhaps her entire existence. It was the last time I went to that lake house, the last time I felt like... She trailed off, and Ryan watched something shift behind her eyes. A crack in the armor, quickly sealed. When she spoke again, her voice had regained its executive crispness, but the question came out strange and sudden and completely wrong for the context. Do you think I'm beautiful? Ryan's entire world narrowed to those 6 words. This had to be a test, or a trap, or some kind of bizarre power play he was too exhausted and underpaid to understand. Women who looked like Veronica Sloan, who commanded empires and appeared on magazine covers, didn't ask IT technicians if they were beautiful. Except she just had. And she was waiting for an answer, watching him with eyes that were suddenly, devastatingly human. Ryan thought about Emma, about the 1,000 times she'd asked him if her drawing was good, if her dress was pretty, if he liked her new haircut. He'd learned that children didn't want empty praise. They wanted to be seen, really seen. They could sense the difference between patronizing and genuine, between what you thought they wanted to hear and what you actually thought. Maybe that instinct didn't disappear when you grew up. Maybe it just got buried under layers of professionalism and power and pretending. Maybe Veronica Sloane was asking because no one had given her an honest answer in years. "I think," Ryan said carefully, choosing each word like a step across unstable ground, "that you look beautiful in that photograph because you look real, like a person instead of a position." Veronica's eyebrows rose fractionally. "And now? Now you look like someone who's forgotten what it feels like to sit by a lake with your feet in the water." The words came out before he could stop them, before his brain could catch up and remind him that you don't say things like that to CEOs, that honesty was a luxury for people who could afford to lose their jobs. But it was too late. The truth was out there, hanging in the air between them like smoke. Veronica stared at him. The silence extended so long that Ryan started mentally calculating his severance package and how quickly he could update his resume. Then, impossibly, the corner of her mouth twitched, not quite a smile, more like the ghost of something she'd forgotten how to do. "Get out," she said softly. Ryan grabbed his toolkit so fast he nearly knocked it off the desk. "Yes, ma'am. I apologize if I don't mean—" She closed her eyes briefly, and when she opened them, there was something that might have been amusement. "I mean, thank you for fixing the computer. You can go. You're not fired." "Oh." Ryan felt his heart rate begin its slow descent from catastrophic. "Right. Okay. If you need anything else, I won't." She'd already turned back to her monitors, back to the world of spreadsheets and strategic planning and quarterly projections. The woman from the photograph might as well have been from a different lifetime. "Close the door on your way out." Ryan fled. Catherine glanced up as he passed her desk, her expression suggesting she'd witnessed 1,000 awkward exits and filed them all under "not my problem." Ryan jabbed the elevator button with more force than necessary, his hands slightly shaking. The descent back to the 8th floor felt faster than the ascent. Gravity always won. Marcus appeared at his desk before Ryan had even set down his toolkit. "How'd it go? She chew you out? I heard she made Davidson cry last year when he couldn't recover a deleted email." "It was fine. Driver conflict, fixed in 10 minutes. "Yeah? You look like you've seen a ghost." Ryan thought about the photograph, about the question, about the impossible moment of truth with someone who lived in a completely different stratosphere. "Just not used to the executive level. Different air up there." Marcus laughed and clapped him on the shoulder. "Get used to it, man. Word is they're implementing a new IT support structure. Might mean more rotation to the upper floors." Ryan spent the rest of the day buried in mundane problems. Password resets, monitor malfunctions, someone's keyboard that had stopped working after they spilled coffee on it for the 3rd time this month. Normal, fixable, safe. He left at exactly 5 o'clock, same as always. Emma's preschool was a cheerful chaos of construction paper and finger paint, and the particular acoustic hell of 34-year-olds all talking at once. She spotted him the moment he walked through the door and launched herself at his legs with the full-body enthusiasm only small children could manage. "Daddy, we made scarecrows today. Mine has a purple hat because Miss Rachel said we could use creative colors, and Tommy said scarecrows can't be purple. But Miss Rachel said art doesn't have rules, and I said that's not true because you have to stay inside the lines. But Miss Rachel said—" Ryan scooped her up mid-sentence, breathing in the scent of apple juice and playground mulch and the strawberry shampoo he'd used on her hair that morning. "Sounds like you and Miss Rachel had a philosophical disagreement about the nature of artistic expression." Emma looked at him with serious blue eyes, her mother's eyes, though Ryan tried not to think about that. "What's philos? It means you were both thinking hard about important questions." "Oh." She considered this. "Then yes, we philosophized. That's what I said." The drive home was filled with Emma's narration of her day, delivered in the stream of consciousness style of someone who'd been saving up stories and couldn't get them out fast enough. Ryan made the appropriate sounds of interest and amazement, his mind only half engaged, the other half still stuck in a top-floor office with a question that shouldn't have been asked. Do you think I'm beautiful? Their apartment was small, 2 bedrooms in a building that had been optimistically described as vintage by the rental agent and more accurately characterized as old by everyone else. But it was clean, and the locks worked, and the heating was reliable, and Emma had decorated her room with enough stuffed animals and crayon masterpieces to make it feel like home. Ryan made dinner. Spaghetti with the sauce from a jar that Emma insisted was the best in the whole world because she didn't know any better. And they ate together at the small kitchen table while she told him about the upcoming fall festival. "And I get to say my line in front of everyone," she said, twirling pasta on her fork with more enthusiasm than skill. "The pumpkins are ready. That's my line. Do you think I'll remember it? I think you've practiced it so much that you'll remember it even when you're 30. That's really old. Thanks, sweetheart." After dinner, after bath time, after 2 stories and 3 requests for water, and 1 negotiation about whether stuffed giraffes needed to sleep under the covers or on top of them, Emma finally settled into sleep. Ryan stood in her doorway for a moment, watching her breathe, feeling the weight of responsibility and love and terror that never really went away. He'd been 24 when Emma was born. 24 and married to a woman he'd thought he knew, building a life he'd thought was solid. Then Rebecca had announced, 3 weeks after Emma's first birthday, that motherhood wasn't what she'd expected, that she felt trapped, that she needed to find herself. She'd found herself in Portland with a yoga instructor named Derek. Ryan had found himself alone with a toddler and a mortgage he couldn't afford, and a sudden education in the difference between partnership and solo parenthood. The divorce had been swift and clean in the legal sense, devastating in every other. Rebecca sent a check every month, child support, exactly the amount required by law, and a birthday card for Emma that arrived with clockwork precision. She'd seen her daughter exactly 4 times in 3 years. Ryan had moved them to this smaller apartment, taken the steady but unglamorous IT job, built a life from routines and reliability and the fierce determination to be enough for Emma, even though he was just one person. It worked. Mostly. Until moments like this, when exhaustion settled into his bones, and he wondered if he was doing it right. If Emma would remember these years fondly, or if she'd one day realize all the things she'd missed because her father had been too tired, too broke, too alone. His phone buzzed. A work email, unusual for this late. From vsloan@sloanindustries.com to rcolol@sloanindustries.com. Subject, follow-up. Ryan stared at the sender line. The CEO didn't email individual IT technicians. The CEO probably didn't know individual IT technicians existed. He opened it. "Mr. Cole, your direct honesty this morning was unexpected and, upon reflection, valuable. I'd like to continue our conversation. Please report to my office tomorrow at 11 a.m. This is not a request related to computer repair." V.S. Ryan read it 3 times. Then he checked the sender address again, convinced it had to be some kind of prank or phishing attempt or cosmic mistake. But no, it was real. The CEO of Sloan Industries wanted to continue their conversation. About what? Beauty? Lakes? The gap between who people were and who they'd become? Ryan looked at his calendar. Tomorrow at 11 he was supposed to be replacing a failed router on the 14th floor. A normal task. An invisible task. A safe task. He should decline. Politely, professionally, with an excuse about prior commitments. Instead, he found himself typing a response. "Miss Sloan, I'll be there. Ryan Cole." He hit send before he could second-guess it, before logic could intervene, before the voice in his head that sounded like caution and responsibility could talk him out of it. Then he sat in the quiet apartment, listening to Emma's soft breathing from the next room, and wondered what he'd just agreed to. Outside, the city hummed with 1,000 invisible lives, each one moving through their careful routines, their constructed safety, their chosen invisibility. Ryan had just stepped out of the shadows, and Veronica Sloan, the woman who commanded empires, who'd forgotten how to sit by lakes, who'd asked a question that should never have been spoken aloud, was waiting on the other side with an answer he didn't know how to give. The digital clock on the microwave ticked over to 10:47 p.m. Tomorrow would come quickly, too quickly. Ryan didn't sleep well that night. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, watching shadows from passing headlights slide across the plaster like slow-moving ghosts, his mind turning over the email again and again like a puzzle with missing pieces. "I'd like to continue our conversation." What conversation? They'd barely spoken. He'd fixed her computer, made an observation he shouldn't have made, and somehow that had cracked open a door he hadn't even known existed. Now she wanted him to walk through it at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning into a world where he didn't belong, to discuss things that had nothing to do with network protocols or system diagnostics. At 2 o'clock a.m., Emma called out from her room, a bad dream about a dragon who ate all the pumpkins. Ryan sat on the edge of her bed, smoothing her hair back from her forehead, whispering reassurances until she drifted back to sleep. In the darkness of her room, surrounded by stuffed animals and crayon drawings, the email felt even more surreal. This was his reality, nightmares about pumpkin-eating dragons, not philosophical discussions with CEOs. By morning, he'd convinced himself to cancel. He drafted the email 3 different ways while making Emma's breakfast, each version more apologetic than the last. But when he actually tried to send it, his finger hovered over the button and refused to move. "Daddy, you're staring at your phone again," Emma said around a mouthful of waffle. "Miss Rachel says screens at breakfast are bad for family time." "Miss Rachel is very wise." Ryan set the phone face down on the counter. "Eat your waffle, philosopher." "What's a philos, the word from yesterday?" "Philosopher, someone who thinks about big questions." Emma considered this seriously. "Like what?" "Like why we're here. What makes something beautiful? Whether it's better to be safe or honest." "Those are silly questions," Emma announced. "We're here because you picked me up from school. Things are beautiful when they're pretty. And you should always be honest because lying is bad." Ryan smiled despite the knot in his stomach. "When you're right, you're right." But the questions didn't feel silly at 10:45 a.m. when he stood outside Veronica Sloane's office for the second time in 2 days, his palms sweating like he was 17 again, and waiting outside the principal's office. Catherine looked up from her desk with the same professionally pleasant expression that revealed absolutely nothing. "Mr. Cole, Ms. Sloane is expecting you. Go right in." The door was already open. Veronica stood at the windows, her back to the room, silhouetted against the morning light. She wore a different suit, charcoal gray instead of black, but the same severe posture, the same controlled intensity that made the air feel denser. "Close the door," she said without turning around. Ryan did, the soft click seeming unnaturally loud in the vast office. "Do you know why I asked you here, Mr. Cole?" "Honestly?" "No, ma'am. Yesterday you told me I look like someone who's forgotten what it feels like to sit by a lake with my feet in the water." She finally turned to face him, and her expression was unreadable. "No one has spoken to me that honestly in 3 years. Not my executives, not my board members. Not even my therapist, who I pay an exorbitant amount to tell me uncomfortable truths." Ryan shifted his weight, unsure whether he was being praised or reprimanded. "I apologize if I overstepped." "Stop apologizing." Veronica moved away from the windows, not toward her desk, but toward the small seating area in the corner, 2 leather chairs positioned at an angle, a small table between them. "Sit." It wasn't a request. Ryan sat, feeling the expensive leather conform to him in a way his furniture at home never did. Veronica took the other chair, and for the first time they were on the same level. Not technician and executive, not problem and solution, just 2 people in chairs. "I looked at your file last night," Veronica said, and Ryan's stomach dropped. "Single father, 4-year-old daughter. You've been with the company for 2 years. Performance reviews are consistently excellent. You leave exactly at 5 o'clock every day. Never late, never early, no vacation days used, no sick days. You turn down every opportunity for advancement that would require evening work or travel." Ryan's jaw tightened. "My daughter needs—" "I'm not criticizing, I'm observing." Veronica leaned back slightly, studying him with the same intensity she'd probably used on quarterly reports. "You've made yourself invisible on purpose. You do your work well enough to keep your job, but not so well that anyone notices you. You've built your entire professional life around not being seen." The accuracy of it stung. "Is there a question in there, ma'am?" "Yes." Veronica's gaze didn't waver. "What does it cost you?" Ryan blinked. Of all the questions he'd anticipated, that wasn't one of them. What do you mean? Being invisible. Choosing safety over everything else. What does it cost you? The question hung in the air between them, and Ryan felt something shift in his chest. A recognition of shared territory, of understanding that came from unexpected places. Everything, he said quietly. And nothing. I get to be there for Emma. I get to be the parent she deserves. But sometimes I lie awake wondering if I'm teaching her to make herself small, to settle for safe instead of reaching for more. Veronica nodded slowly, as if he'd confirmed something she'd already suspected. My father built this company from nothing. Took 40 years. When he died, I was 27 and everyone expected me to sell it, cash out, live comfortably off the inheritance. Instead, I gutted the leadership structure, pivoted our entire business model, and tripled our revenue in 18 months. I remember reading about it, Ryan said. The business journals called it revolutionary. They called me ruthless. Veronica's smile was sharp-edged. They weren't wrong. I made decisions that cost people their jobs. I killed departments that had existed for decades. I became exactly what the company needed me to be: hard, decisive, untouchable. She paused. The woman in that photograph? She died the same week my father did. I haven't been back to that lake house since. I haven't had a conversation that wasn't strategic in 3 years. I haven't let anyone see me as anything other than the CEO. Ryan understood then why he was here. Not because she wanted AT support or even advice. She wanted a witness, someone who'd glimpsed the person underneath the position and hadn't immediately tried to use it against her. Why me? He asked. You have executives, advisors, people whose entire job is to tell me what I want to hear, to manage me, to treat me like a resource to be optimized. Veronica leaned forward slightly. You looked at that photograph for 3 seconds and saw more truth than my entire leadership team has acknowledged in 3 years. You didn't flatter me. You didn't strategize. You just told me what you saw. I have a 4-year-old, Ryan said with a small smile. Honesty is kind of our default setting at home. Then you're raising her right. Veronica stood, moving to her desk, and for a moment Ryan thought the conversation was over. But instead of dismissing him, she pulled a folder from a drawer. I'm launching an initiative. Internal working title is Groundswell. The premise is simple. We've grown so fast that we've lost touch with the people who actually make this company run. Not the executives, not the department heads. The people on the ground floor. She handed him the folder. Ryan opened it to find organizational charts, survey data, consultant reports, all pointing to the same conclusion. Sloan Industries was hemorrhaging talent at the lower levels, losing good people who felt invisible, unheard, undervalued. The consultants say I need to improve communication, Veronica continued. More town halls, better messaging, prettier mission statements. Her tone suggested what she thought of that approach. But that's just more noise from the top down. What I need is someone who actually understands what it's like to be invisible in this company. Ryan looked up from the folder, realization dawning. You can't be serious. I'm offering you a position on the Groundswell Task Force. 6 months, temporary reassignment. You'd work directly with me and 2 other executives to identify systemic problems and develop real solutions. Your perspective would be invaluable because you're not management, not HR, not someone who spent 20 years learning how to speak in corporate euphemisms. Miss Sloan, I appreciate the offer, but I can't. The position comes with a 40% salary increase, Veronica said calmly. Flexible hours so you can maintain your childcare schedule. No required travel. And most importantly, a voice in decisions that affect people like you, the ones who keep this place running while everyone else takes credit. Ryan felt the folder grow heavy in his hands. 40%. That was the difference between barely making rent and maybe having enough left over for Emma's college fund. That was music lessons she'd asked about. A better preschool, a future that looked less like survival and more like possibility. But it was also visibility, exposure, risk. Everything he'd carefully avoided for 3 years. I need time to think about it, he managed. You have until Friday. Veronica returned to her chair, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. I know what I'm asking, Mr. Cole. I'm asking you to give up safety, to trust that being seen won't destroy you. It's the same thing I haven't been able to do for 3 years." "Then why are you doing this?" Ryan asked. "Why risk it now?" Veronica was quiet for a long moment, her gaze drifting to the windows, to the city beyond. "Because yesterday, for 3 seconds, I saw myself as I used to be. And I realized I don't want to be someone who's forgotten how to sit by a lake. But I can't change alone. I've tried. Every system, every structure, every habit I've built reinforces who I've become." She looked back at him. "I need someone who isn't invested in maintaining the illusion. Someone who won't let me pretend." The honesty in her voice was startling, almost painful to hear. Ryan thought about Emma, about the fall festival on Friday, about the careful life he'd constructed. Then he thought about the woman in the photograph, barefoot and laughing, and the distance between that person and the one sitting across from him now. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes?" "That photograph, why did you keep it if it hurt to see?" Veronica's expression flickered. "Because forgetting who you were is worse than remembering who you aren't anymore." She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "Think about my offer. And Ryan," she used his first name for the first time, "whatever you decide, thank you for yesterday, for seeing." Ryan left the office in a daze, the folder tucked under his arm, his mind spinning. Marcus cornered him the moment he returned to the IT department. "Dude, you were gone for almost an hour. What happened? Did she offer you a job or something?" Ryan looked at his supervisor, a good guy, decent boss, someone who'd spent 15 years in the same position and seemed content with the safety of it. "Something like that." That night, after Emma was asleep, Ryan sat at the kitchen table with the folder spread in front of him. The data was damning. Turnover rates climbing, employee satisfaction plummeting, a growing disconnect between the company's public image and the reality of working there. He could fix this, or at least help. His entire career had been about fixing things, solving problems, making systems work better. But this wasn't a router or a crashed hard drive. This was people. Visibility. The risk that speaking truth to power would end exactly the way it usually did, with the truth teller becoming expendable. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Veronica. I don't normally give employees my personal number, but I wanted you to know, whatever you decide, I meant what I said. Thank you for your honesty. It mattered." Ryan stared at the message, at the unexpected vulnerability in it, at the way it mirrored his own fear of being seen. He thought about Emma's question from breakfast. Should you always be honest? She'd said yes, of course, with the certainty of someone who'd never learned that honesty could cost you everything. But maybe that was the point. Maybe the reason he taught her that honesty mattered was because he still believed it, even when it was dangerous, even when safety seemed smarter. Ryan picked up his phone and typed a response. "I'm in, but I need one condition. I still leave at 5 every day. Emma comes first." The reply came within seconds. "Agreed. See you Monday morning. We have work to do." Ryan set down the phone and closed the folder, his heart hammering against his ribs. He'd just agreed to step into the light, to be seen, to risk everything he'd carefully built. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something other than the grinding weight of survival. He felt alive. Friday arrived with the chaotic energy that only elementary school fall festivals could generate. Ryan left work at 3 o'clock, using one of his carefully hoarded personal hours, and arrived at Emma's preschool to find the parking lot transformed into a carnival of hay bales, pumpkins, and construction paper decorations that were already wilting in the afternoon heat. Emma spotted him from across the playground and ran with such velocity that Ryan barely had time to brace himself before she collided with his legs. You came! Tommy's dad didn't come, and Sarah's mom had to work, and I told everyone my daddy would be here, and you are." "Wouldn't miss it, sweetheart." Ryan scooped her up, ignoring the protest from his lower back. "When's your big performance?" 4 o'clock. We have to get good seats." The theater was the school's multi-purpose room with a small stage at one end and rows of tiny chairs that made every adult look like they'd stumbled into a dollhouse. Ryan wedged himself into a seat in the third row, surrounded by other parents wielding phones like weapons, ready to document every second of their children's moment in the spotlight. The harvest play was exactly what you'd expect from a production starring 4-year-olds. Enthusiastic, chaotic, and only loosely connected to the script. One child cried. Another waved at her parents through the entire performance. A small boy playing a cornstalk fell asleep standing up. But when Emma stepped forward in her construction paper pumpkin costume, looked directly at Ryan, and declared with fierce concentration, "The pumpkins are ready!" He felt his throat tighten with an emotion that was part pride, part terror, part overwhelming love for this small person who trusted him to show up, to be there, to keep being her safe place in a world that could be harsh and unpredictable. After the play, after the cookies and apple cider, after Emma had shown him every single decoration and introduced him to 6 different friends and their parents, they walked to the car in the golden late afternoon light. "Did I do good?" Emma asked, her hand in his. "You were perfect." Tommy forgot his line and Mrs. Martinez had to whisper it to him, but I remembered mine all by myself. "I noticed. I'm very proud of you." Emma was quiet for a moment, swinging their joined hands. "Daddy?" "Yes, sweetheart? Are you scared of anything?" The question caught him off guard. "Sometimes." "Why?" "Because you always tell me it's okay to be brave even when you're scared. But I wanted to know if you get scared too." Ryan stopped walking, crouching down to her eye level right there in the parking lot. "I get scared all the time." "Really?" "Really. I was scared when you were born that I wouldn't know how to be a good dad. I'm scared every time you climb too high on the playground. I'm scared that I won't be enough for you." Emma frowned, processing this. But you're my daddy. You're the best daddy, and you're the best Emma. But being the best doesn't mean you never get scared. It means you do the thing anyway. She thought about this seriously. "Like when I did my line even though everyone was watching." "Exactly like that." Emma nodded, satisfied with this answer. "Then I think you should do the scary thing too." "What scary thing?" "The one you keep thinking about at night. I can hear you walking around when you can't sleep." Ryan pulled her into a hug, marveling at how perceptive she was, how much she noticed even when he thought he was protecting her from his worries. "You're right, I should." "Good. Can we get ice cream now?" They got ice cream. And on Monday morning, when Ryan walked into Veronica Sloane's office to begin his temporary reassignment to the Groundswell Task Force, he thought about Emma's words, about doing the scary thing anyway, about being brave even when you didn't feel brave. Veronica was already there, along with 2 other people Ryan didn't recognize, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a younger man who looked uncomfortable in his suit. "Ryan Cole, meet Patricia Chen and David Okafor. Patricia heads our HR Analytics division. David is a senior manager from manufacturing who I've pulled onto this project for his perspective." Veronica gestured to the small conference table by the windows. "We're going to spend the next 6 months trying to fix what's broken, and we're going to start by acknowledging that most of it is my fault." Patricia looked shocked. David looked terrified. Ryan felt something like hope. Veronica met his eyes across the table, and for just a moment he saw a flicker of the woman from the photograph, uncertain, vulnerable, trying to find her way back to something real. "So," she continued, pulling out a chair, "let's start with honesty. David, tell me what's really happening in manufacturing. Not the sanitized version you'd put in a report. The truth." David swallowed hard, glanced at Ryan as if seeking permission, then took a breath and began to speak. And Ryan realized that Veronica had been right. They both had. Being seen was terrifying, but being invisible was worse. The conversation lasted 3 hours. David talked about equipment that hadn't been replaced in a decade, safety shortcuts that everyone knew about, but no one reported, supervisors who'd given up trying to communicate with upper management because they'd learned that nothing ever changed. Patricia presented data that confirmed what David was saying. Satisfaction scores in manufacturing had dropped 43% in the last 2 years. Ryan mostly listened, taking notes, watching how Veronica received the information. She didn't get defensive, didn't make excuses, just absorbed each piece of bad news like she was building a map of everything that had gone wrong. "The problem," Ryan finally said during a lull in the conversation, "is that you've created a system where telling the truth feels dangerous. Everyone's learned that bad news gets punished, so they stop sharing it. Then you make decisions based on incomplete information, which makes things worse, which makes people even less likely to speak up. Veronica turned to him. So how do we break the cycle? You have to prove that honesty won't be weaponized. Not once, not as a test. Consistently, over time, until people believe it. That could take years, Patricia said quietly. Then we start now, Veronica replied. She looked at each of them in turn. This task force operates under one rule: radical honesty. No corporate speak, no managing up. If you see a problem, you name it. If I'm wrong, you tell me. If this entire initiative is misguided, you say so. Agreed? David nodded hesitantly. Patricia smiled. Ryan felt the weight of the commitment settle onto his shoulders. Agreed, he said. They met 3 times a week after that. Early mornings before the office filled up, when the building was quiet and the city outside was just beginning to wake. Ryan adjusted his schedule, dropping Emma off at early care on those days, hating the extra time apart, but believing in what they were trying to do. Slowly, carefully, they began to build something. Not a solution, not yet, but a foundation of trust. David brought other manufacturing workers to the meetings, people who'd never set foot in the executive suite before. Patricia started conducting anonymous surveys that actually felt anonymous. Ryan pushed back on Veronica's ideas when they sounded good in theory, but would fail in practice, and gradually, she started to listen instead of defend. You're different, Ryan told her after one particularly difficult session where she'd accepted criticism about her leadership style without flinching. They were alone in the conference room, gathering up papers while the others had already left. Different how? Veronica asked, not looking up from her tablet. More like the person in the photograph. She did look up then, something vulnerable flickering across her face. I've been thinking about that lake, about going back. You should. I don't know if I remember how to be that person anymore. Ryan thought about Emma asking if he was scared of things, about choosing bravery even when it felt impossible. Maybe you don't have to remember. Maybe you just have to decide. Veronica set down her tablet. Is that what you did? Decided to be seen? I decided to stop letting fear make all my choices. The being seen part is still terrifying. But you're doing it anyway. Yeah. Ryan smiled slightly. I have a 4-year-old who's braver than I am. Hard to justify hiding when she's out there doing harvest plays in front of crowds. Something softened in Veronica's expression. Not the CEO, not the woman who commanded boardrooms, just a person recognizing another person's truth. I'd like to meet her sometime. Emma, right? Yeah. Though I should warn you, she asks a lot of philosophical questions for someone who still believes in the tooth fairy. Sounds like my kind of person. They stood there in the quiet conference room, the city sprawling beyond the windows, and Ryan understood that something had shifted between them. Not romance. That would have been too simple, too predictable. This was something stranger and more valuable. Recognition. 2 people who'd been invisible in different ways finding each other in the space between safety and honesty. Same time Wednesday? Veronica asked. I'll be here. Ryan left the building as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. He picked up Emma from aftercare, listened to her describe the injustice of having to share the good crayons during art time, and felt the dual weight of 2 worlds, the one where he was just dad, making dinner and doing bedtime routines, and the one where his voice was starting to matter in ways he'd never imagined possible. That night, after Emma was asleep, his phone buzzed with a message from Veronica. Thank you for today, for all the days. You're teaching me that honesty doesn't have to destroy everything. It's harder than I expected, but worth it. Ryan typed back, same, on all counts. He set down the phone and realized he was smiling, not the careful, controlled expression he wore at work, but something real and unguarded. The invisible man was becoming visible, and the untouchable CEO was remembering how to be human. Neither of them knew yet where this path would lead, but for the first time in years, they were both willing to find out. 3 weeks into the Groundswell initiative, Ryan received his first death threat. It arrived in his work email at 7:42 on a Tuesday morning, subject line blank, message brief and venomous. You're making enemies in places you can't see. Watch your back, errand boy. Ryan stared at the screen, his coffee going cold in his hand. He'd known there would be resistance. Change always bred pushback. But he hadn't expected it to feel so personal, so visceral. He forwarded the email to Veronica without comment. Her response came within minutes. My office, now. When Ryan arrived, he found Veronica on the phone, her voice clipped and precise in a way that suggested someone on the other end was having a very bad morning. She gestured for him to sit, then ended the call with a terse, I expect that resolved by noon, Michael, not 1 minute later. She set down the phone and looked at Ryan with an expression that was part concern, part cold fury. Security is tracing the email. Whoever sent it was smart enough to route it through a proxy, but we'll find them. It's fine, Ryan said, though his hands were still shaking slightly. Just someone trying to scare me. It's not fine. Veronica stood, moving to the windows in that restless way she had when she was thinking through a problem. This is exactly what I was afraid would happen. The moment we started asking real questions, the moment we gave voice to people who've been silenced, we became a threat to everyone who benefits from the current system. You're talking about your own executives. I'm talking about middle management, the layer between ground-level employees and leadership, the people who control information flow, who've built their entire careers on maintaining the status quo. She turned back to him. David told you about the manufacturing supervisor who's been blocking safety complaints? Ryan nodded. It had come up in their last session, a department head named Richard Moss, who'd been with the company for 20 years, who had a reputation for efficiency but also for silencing anyone who raised concerns about outdated equipment or dangerous shortcuts. Richard is on the list of people I'm planning to restructure, Veronica continued, along with 6 other managers who've been protected by tenure and relationships rather than performance. But they know something's coming. They can feel the ground shifting. So they're trying to intimidate anyone who might testify against them. Exactly. Veronica returned to her desk, pulling up something on her computer. I'm moving up the timeline. We go to the board next week instead of next month. Ryan felt his stomach drop. Next week? We're not ready. We don't have enough documentation, we have enough truth. And if we wait, they'll have time to build a defense, to discredit our findings, to make this look like a personal vendetta instead of systemic reform. Her eyes met his. I need to know if you're still in, because this is where it gets dangerous. Not anonymous emails dangerous, career-ending, reputation-destroying dangerous. Ryan thought about Emma, about the careful life he'd built, about everything he stood to lose. Then he thought about the manufacturing workers who'd started showing up to their sessions, people who'd worked for Sloan Industries for decades and had never once been asked what they needed, what they thought, whether they felt safe. I'm in, he said. But I need your word that if this goes sideways, Emma doesn't suffer for it. I can lose my job, my reputation, whatever, but she needs to be protected. You have my word. Veronica's expression softened almost imperceptibly. And Ryan, you won't lose your job. Not while I'm CEO. The promise felt both reassuring and terrifying, a reminder of how much power she wielded and how quickly that could change if the board turned against her. The next 6 days were a blur of preparation. Ryan found himself working later than he had in years, arranging for Emma to stay with his neighbor, Mrs. Chen, on the evenings when he couldn't leave by 5. Emma didn't complain, but her questions got more frequent. Why are you so tired, Daddy? When will work be normal again? Are you still coming to my ballet recital next month? Each question felt like a small knife, a reminder of what he was risking, what he might be sacrificing for a chance at changing a system that had never cared whether he existed. On Thursday evening, 3 days before the board presentation, Ryan stayed late to finalize the data analysis. The office had emptied hours ago, leaving just the hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew making their rounds. He was so focused on the spreadsheet in front of him that he didn't hear footsteps approaching until a voice made him jump. Burning the midnight oil? Ryan looked up to find a man in an expensive suit standing in his cubicle entrance. Late 50s, silver hair, the kind of confident posture that came from decades of being important. He didn't recognize him, but something about the way the man smiled suggested they weren't about to have a friendly conversation. Can I help you? Ryan asked, his hand instinctively moving toward his phone. Richard Moss. The man extended a hand that Ryan didn't shake. I believe you've been discussing me in your little task force meetings. Ryan's pulse quickened. I think you should leave. I think we should talk. Richard pulled up a chair uninvited, settling into it like he owned the space. See, I've been with this company for 22 years, worked my way up from the factory floor. I know how things work here, the reality underneath all the pretty mission statements and diversity initiatives. I'm not interested in, you're making a mistake, Cole. You and that bleeding heart CEO of yours, you think you're helping people? You're destroying jobs. Every safety regulation you want to implement costs money. Every policy change you're proposing means higher overhead, lower profit margins. You know what happens when profits drop? People get laid off, Ryan said quietly. Exactly. So you're fighting for better conditions for workers who won't have jobs in 6 months because you made the company uncompetitive. Richard leaned forward. I've seen reformers before. They come in with their idealism and their surveys and their task forces. They last about a year before reality sets in. Then they either adapt or they disappear. Is that a threat? It's a fact. I'm offering you a way out. Walk away from this initiative. Go back to fixing computers. Keep your head down, and when the dust settles, you'll still have a job. Maybe even a promotion. I could use someone with your technical skills in my department. Ryan looked at this man who represented everything wrong with the system they were trying to fix. The comfortable corruption, the cynical pragmatism that valued efficiency over humanity, the casual cruelty disguised as hard-nosed business sense. No, Ryan said simply. Richard's expression hardened. You're making this personal. You came to my desk at 9 o'clock at night to intimidate me. You made it personal first. I came here to save your career. What do you think happens when Ms. Sloan's little experiment fails? And it will fail because the board isn't going to let a 29-year-old CEO dismantle structures that have kept this company profitable for decades. When she's gone, and she will be gone, people like me will remember who stood with her and who showed better judgment. Then I guess you'll remember me. Ryan stood, gathering his papers. Now, if you'll excuse me, I need to get home to my daughter. He walked out before Richard could respond, his hands shaking, his heart hammering against his ribs. He made it to his car before the adrenaline crash hit, leaving him gripping the steering wheel and breathing hard in the darkness of the parking garage. His phone buzzed, a text from Veronica. Security flagged someone accessing the 8th floor after hours. Are you okay? Ryan typed back with trembling fingers. Richard Moss paid me a visit, offered me a bribe to back out. I declined. The response came immediately. Are you still at the office? Parking garage. Stay there. I'm coming down. 5 minutes later, Veronica's black sedan pulled up next to his aging Honda. She got out, still in her work clothes despite the late hour, and slid into his passenger seat without asking permission. Tell me everything, she said. Ryan did, relaying the conversation word for word. Veronica listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each detail. He's right about one thing, she said when Ryan finished. The board is going to push back hard. I've already heard from 3 members expressing concerns about the initiative's cost projections. So what do we do? Veronica was quiet for a long moment, staring through the windshield at the concrete pillars and flickering fluorescent lights of the garage. We go all in. No halfway measures, no compromises. We present the truth, all of it, and we make them choose between profit margins and people. That's not a choice most boards make in favor of people. I know. She turned to look at him, and in the harsh lighting she looked younger than her 29 years, vulnerable in a way she never allowed herself to be in the office. There's a good chance I lose my position over this. The board has the power to remove me as CEO if they believe I'm damaging shareholder value. But I've realized something over these past few weeks. What? I don't want to be the kind of person who chooses safety over doing what's right. I've been that person for 3 years, and it's made me into someone I don't recognize, someone who would see that photograph and feel nothing but distance from who I used to be. Ryan understood then that this wasn't just about corporate reform or improved working conditions. This was Veronica's own reckoning with the cost of invisibility, with what she'd sacrificed to become untouchable. If you do this, Ryan said carefully. If you really push the board, there's no going back. You'll have enemies. Real ones. Not just people who disagree with your quarterly strategy. I already have enemies. At least these will be earned by standing for something that matters. She smiled slightly. Besides, I have something I didn't have before. What's that? Witnesses. People who've seen the truth and are willing to speak it. David, Patricia, you. She paused. Especially you. I'm just an IT guy who got pulled into something way above his pay grade. You're the person who looked at me and saw someone who'd forgotten how to sit by a lake. You're the person who chose honesty when silence would have been safer. That's not just an IT guy, Ryan. That's someone who understands that being seen is worth the risk of being hurt. They sat in the quiet car, two people from completely different worlds who'd somehow ended up in the same fight, facing the same impossible choice between safety and truth. Emma asked me if I was scared of anything, Ryan said after a while. I told her I was scared all the time, but that being brave means doing the thing anyway. Smart kid. She is. She's the smartest person I know. Ryan looked at Veronica. I'm terrified of losing my job, of not being able to provide for her, of failing at the one thing I'm supposed to be good at, being her dad. But I'm more terrified of teaching her that you should stay invisible because it's safer, that you should let injustice happen because fighting it might cost you something. Veronica nodded slowly. My father used to say that character is what you do when no one's watching and everyone's watching. I never understood what he meant until now. What do you think he'd say about what we're doing? Honestly, he'd probably think I was being reckless. He built this company through careful, calculated risks, not idealistic crusades. She smiled sadly. But the woman in that photograph, the one who wasn't afraid to be happy, I think she'd be proud. Ryan's phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Chen. Emma's asleep. Take your time. We're fine here. He showed it to Veronica. I need to go. But Monday morning, at that board meeting, I'll be there. Whatever happens. Thank you. She reached over and squeezed his hand briefly, the first physical contact they'd ever had outside of a formal handshake. Her fingers were cold despite the warmth of the car. For everything. For seeing me. For not letting me hide anymore. Same to you, Ryan said softly. Veronica got out and walked to her car, her heels echoing in the empty garage. Ryan watched her drive away, then sat alone in the darkness, thinking about choices and consequences and the narrow line between bravery and foolishness. He drove home through empty streets, picked up a sleeping Emma from Mrs. Chen's apartment, and carried her to bed without waking her. She felt heavier than she had even a month ago, growing so fast, changing every day, building a life that would soon extend beyond the small world he'd created for them. What kind of world did he want her to inherit? One where staying quiet was rewarded, or one where speaking up mattered, even when it cost you everything? The question kept him awake until dawn. Friday morning brought unexpected news. Ryan arrived at work to find an email from Patricia marked urgent. 3 more managers have resigned overnight. HR is scrambling. Board meeting moved up to tomorrow, Saturday at 10 a.m. Veronica wants us all there. Saturday. The day Emma had ballet. The recital she'd been practicing for all month. The one event she'd been counting down to with the kind of fierce anticipation only 4-year-olds could manage. Ryan called Veronica immediately. I know, she said before he could speak. I know about Emma's recital. I tried to push back on the timing, but the board chair insisted. They know we're prepared, and they want to force a rushed presentation. I can't miss her recital, Veronica. I promised her. I understand. And I won't ask you to choose between your daughter and this initiative. She paused. But I need you to know, if you're not there, they'll use it against us. They'll say our own team members didn't believe the findings were important enough to show up for. Ryan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of impossible choices. When does the recital end? What? Emma's recital. It's at 9 in the morning, 45 minutes. If I leave immediately after, I could make it to the office by 11. The meeting starts at 10. Then you start without me. Present the initial findings, the data analysis. I'll arrive in time for the recommendation section. That's where you need my voice anyway, talking about implementation from a ground-level perspective. Veronica was quiet for so long that Ryan thought the call had dropped. Then, that could work, if you're sure. I'm not sure about anything except that Emma comes first, always. But I can do both. I just need you to hold the line until I get there. I can do that. Something in Veronica's voice shifted. Not relief exactly, but recognition. Ryan, don't speed on the way over. Getting into an accident because you're trying to make a meeting would defeat the entire purpose. Yes, ma'am. And Ryan, thank you for not making me ask you to choose, for finding another way. Saturday morning arrived with the kind of crisp autumn weather that made everything feel sharper, more vivid. Ryan dressed Emma in her pink ballet outfit, watching her spin in front of the mirror with unselfconscious joy. Do I look like a real ballerina, Daddy? You look like the most beautiful ballerina in the entire world. That's what you always say. That's because it's always true. The recital was held in the preschool's multipurpose room, the same space where Emma had performed in the Harvest play. Ryan found a seat in the front row, his phone silenced in his pocket, his attention completely focused on the small stage where Emma and her classmates were arranging themselves in wobbly lines. The music started, something classical that Ryan didn't recognize, and Emma began to dance. She was far from perfect. Her turns were unsteady, her timing slightly off, her expression one of intense concentration rather than joy. But she was trying so hard, reaching for something just beyond her grasp, and Ryan felt his throat tighten with the fierce pride that parenthood brought. She spotted him in the front row, and her whole face lit up, her concentration breaking into a smile so genuine it made his chest ache. He smiled back, giving her a thumbs up, letting her know he saw her. He was proud. He was here. The recital ended at 9:47. Ryan took 3 minutes to hug Emma, to tell her she was amazing, to promise he'd be back to pick her up by 1 o'clock. She clung to him slightly longer than usual. Where are you going? Work. Something important that can't wait. More important than my recital? Ryan knelt down to her eye level, right there in the crowded multipurpose room with other parents trying to get past them. Nothing is more important than you. Nothing. But sometimes being a good dad means doing hard things so I can give you a better life. Do you understand? Emma's blue eyes, so much like her mother's, it sometimes hurt to look at them, studied his face seriously. Like when I have to eat vegetables even though I don't want to? Exactly like that. Okay, but you have to come back. I always come back, I promise. He kissed her forehead, handed her off to Mrs. Chen, who'd agreed to watch her for the afternoon, and walked to his car with his heart in his throat. The drive to Sloan Industries took 18 minutes. Ryan spent them running through talking points, rehearsing arguments, trying to prepare for a confrontation that he knew would determine not just his future, but the futures of hundreds of people who'd trusted him to speak for them. He arrived at 10:23 to find the executive parking garage nearly full, unusual for a Saturday. The board had clearly shown up in force. Ryan took the elevator to the 51st floor, his reflection in the polished doors showing a man who looked far more confident than he felt. The suit he'd bought specifically for this presentation, the first new suit he'd owned in years, fit better than his usual work clothes, but he still felt like an imposter heading into a room full of people who belonged. Catherine was at her desk despite the weekend, her expression unreadable. "They're waiting for you. Conference room B." "How's it going?" "Miss Sloan is holding her ground, but they're not making it easy." Ryan nodded and walked toward the conference room, his footsteps soundless on the expensive carpet. Through the glass walls, he could see the assembled board members, 12 people, mostly men, mostly over 50, all wearing expressions that ranged from skeptical to hostile. Veronica stood at the head of the table, a presentation displayed on the large screen behind her. She looked composed, controlled, every inch the CEO. But Ryan had learned to read the small signs, the slight tension in her shoulders, the way her fingers gripped the remote just a little too tightly. She saw him through the glass and something in her posture relaxed fractionally. Ryan opened the door. 12 pairs of eyes turned toward him with varying degrees of interest and annoyance. One man, silver-haired, expensive suit, the unmistakable bearing of someone used to being the most important person in any room, spoke first. "And you are?" "Ryan Cole. I'm part of the Groundswell Task Force, the IT technician." The man's tone made it clear what he thought of that. We've been hearing quite a lot about your contributions, Mr. Cole. Ms. Sloan seems to think your perspective is invaluable. The skepticism in his voice could have cut glass. Chairman Morrison, Veronica said calmly, Ryan has direct experience with the systemic issues we've identified. His insights have been essential to our findings. Yes, well, we've seen your findings. Morrison gestured to the presentation. Very compelling data, moving testimonials. But what we haven't seen is a realistic implementation plan that doesn't involve gutting our profit margins and restructuring departments that have functioned effectively for decades. Ryan moved to stand beside Veronica, drawing confidence from her presence. With respect, sir, they haven't functioned effectively. They've functioned profitably. There's a difference. The room went very quiet. Morrison's expression hardened. Explain. A manufacturing floor that meets production quotas while ignoring safety violations is profitable in the short term, Ryan said, his voice steadier than he felt. But when someone gets hurt, when OSHA investigates, when the lawsuits start, that's when you discover the real cost of prioritizing numbers over people. The question isn't whether we can afford to make these changes. It's whether we can afford not to. That's a lovely sentiment, Mr. Cole, but this is a business, not a charity. I'm aware. I've worked here for 2 years. I've seen how this business treats the people who actually make it run. Ryan pulled out his phone, calling up the file he'd prepared. In the last 18 months, you've lost 47 senior technicians to competitors. Their exit interviews, when they bothered to give them, cited the same issues. Feeling undervalued, no path for advancement, being treated as replaceable. People leave jobs, another board member interjected. That's normal turnover. It's a 42% increase over the previous 18 months, and the cost of replacing each of those workers, training, lost productivity, recruiting, averages $35,000. That's over $1.6 million in turnover costs that could have been prevented if anyone had listened to what they were saying. Ryan pulled up another slide. Manufacturing has similar numbers. Customer service is worse, 68% turnover in the last year. You're hemorrhaging institutional knowledge and expertise because the people on the ground don't believe their voices matter. He could see he had their attention now, even if it was reluctant. The changes we're proposing aren't charity, Ryan continued. They're strategic investments in retention, in productivity, in building a company where people want to stay instead of counting down the days until they can leave. Yes, there are upfront costs, but the long-term savings exceed the investment by a factor of 3, Veronica interjected, pulling up a detailed financial projection. We've run the numbers conservatively. Even in the worst-case scenario, we break even within 2 years. Best case, we're looking at a 15% increase in productivity and a 40% reduction in turnover-related costs. Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying them both. And the management restructuring you're proposing? The removal of several department heads? 6 managers who have documented patterns of suppressing employee complaints, creating hostile work environments, and prioritizing short-term metrics over sustainable practices, Veronica said firmly. Their removal isn't punitive. It's necessary for any meaningful change to take root. Those managers have relationships with this board, with me personally. I'm aware. Veronica's voice didn't waver. I'm also aware that protecting them sends a message to every employee in this company that loyalty to management is more valuable than honesty about problems. The room erupted in overlapping voices, some supporting, most opposing, all talking over each other in the particular chaos that corporate disagreement created. Ryan watched Veronica navigate it with practiced skill, deflecting attacks, reinforcing arguments, never losing her composure even when the criticism became personal. Then Morrison raised his hand and silence fell. I've heard enough, he said. The board will deliberate and vote on these proposals. Ms. Sloan, Mr. Cole, you're dismissed. Veronica gathered her materials without visible reaction. Ryan followed her out of the conference room, his heart hammering. They made it to her office before either of them spoke. That went better than expected, Veronica said, setting down her laptop. They're going to vote no. Probably. Morrison made his position clear before you arrived, but we got our truth on record. Whatever happens next, they can't claim they didn't know. Ryan sank into one of the chairs by the window, suddenly exhausted. How long until they vote? Could be hours, could be days. Veronica joined him, sitting in the other chair, the same configuration they'd been in during their first real conversation, when he'd told her she looked like someone who'd forgotten how to sit by a lake. How was Emma's recital? The question caught him off guard. She was perfect, completely focused, trying so hard. He smiled despite everything. She asked if work was more important than her ballet. What did you tell her? That nothing is more important than her, but that sometimes being a good father means doing hard things. Veronica nodded slowly. Do you think that's true? That we can be good at our jobs and good to the people we love? I don't know. I'm still figuring it out. Ryan looked at her. What about you? If the board votes against you, if they remove you as CEO, do you have people who will be there? I have a mother in Connecticut who thinks I work too much. A brother who manages a bookstore and can't understand why I don't just relax more. Friends who I haven't spoken to in months because I kept canceling plans. She smiled without humor. I've been very good at my job and very bad at everything else. That's not too late to change, isn't it? I'm 29 years old and I can't remember the last time I had a conversation that wasn't about business strategy or quarterly projections. I don't know who I am when I'm not the CEO. Then maybe it's time to find out. They sat together in the quiet office as the afternoon light shifted through the windows. Two people who'd chosen truth over safety and were waiting to learn the cost. Ryan's phone buzzed at 12:47. A text from Mrs. Chen. Emma's asking about you. I told her you'd be back soon. He showed it to Veronica. I need to go. Of course. I'll call you when the board makes a decision. Ryan stood, then hesitated. Whatever they decide, thank you for this, for letting me be part of something that mattered. Thank you for teaching me that honesty doesn't have to destroy you. Veronica stood as well. And Ryan, tell Emma that her dad is brave, really brave, and she should be proud of him. Ryan left before the emotion in his throat could become visible, before he could say something that would make this moment feel like an ending when he desperately needed it to be a beginning. He picked up Emma from Mrs. Chen's apartment and took her for ice cream, listening to her detailed analysis of which classmate had done the best in the recital and why. She was generous in her assessments, finding something to praise in every performance, showing a kindness that Ryan hoped she'd never lose. His phone rang at 4:37 p.m. Veronica's voice was carefully controlled. The board voted 7-5 against implementation of the full proposal, but they approved a pilot program, smaller scope, 6-month trial period in manufacturing and IT. If we can demonstrate measurable improvement, they'll consider expanding it. That's not nothing. It's not what we wanted. But it's a chance. They gave us a chance. They did. He could hear something shifting in her voice, not defeat, but recalibration. Morrison also made it clear that my position as CEO depends on the pilot program's success. If it fails, I'm out. Then we make sure it doesn't fail. We? You think I'm walking away now? Ryan glanced at Emma, who was thoroughly occupied with her ice cream. I'm in this until the end, whatever that looks like. Veronica was quiet for a long moment. There's something else. I made a decision. I'm going back to the lake house next weekend, the first time in 2 years. I need to remember what it feels like to be that person again, even if it's just for a day. That's good. That's really good. I was wondering if you and Emma wanted to come, not as work colleagues, just as people who understand what it means to be trying to find your way back to something real. Ryan felt his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't quite name. I'd need to check with Emma, but yeah, I think we'd like that. After they hung up, Ryan sat watching his daughter finish her ice cream, her face smeared with chocolate, her eyes bright with the uncomplicated happiness of a child who danced and been seen and was loved. The board had given them 6 months to prove that truth mattered more than profit margins, that people were worth investing in, that change was possible even in systems built to resist it. It wasn't the victory they'd hoped for, but it was enough to start. And for the first time in 3 years, Ryan felt like he was moving towards something instead of just surviving, like the invisible man was becoming real, like the choice to be seen, however terrifying, was leading somewhere that mattered. Emma looked up at him with chocolate-covered cheeks. "Daddy, you're smiling." "I am." "How come?" "Because I'm proud of you, and I'm learning to be proud of me too." She considered this seriously, then nodded as if it made perfect sense. "That's good. Everyone should be proud of themselves." Out of the mouths of 4-year-olds, Ryan thought, came the kind of truth that adults spent lifetimes trying to remember. The following Saturday arrived with the kind of perfect autumn weather that seemed almost designed for new beginnings. Cool enough for sweaters, warm enough for open windows, the trees blazing with colors that would be gone in another week. Ryan packed a small bag for Emma while she narrated every item he was including, offering opinions on whether her stuffed giraffe needed to come along for emotional support. He'd spent the week second-guessing Veronica's invitation, wondering if bringing his daughter to the lake house of a CEO he'd known for barely 2 months was crossing some invisible professional line. But Veronica had been clear. Not work colleagues. Just people trying to find their way back to something real. The drive took 90 minutes through increasingly rural landscape, the city's concrete and glass giving way to farmland and forests, and the kind of small towns where everyone knew everyone else's business. Emma pressed her face to the window, cataloging everything they passed with the running commentary of someone who found the entire world endlessly fascinating. "Daddy, why are those cows just standing there?" "That's what cows do, sweetheart." "But aren't they bored?" "I don't think cows get bored the way people do." "That's sad. Everyone should have something exciting to do." Ryan smiled, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. She'd insisted on wearing her favorite dress, purple with yellow flowers, because they were going somewhere important, and important places required special outfits. Her logic was unassailable. The lake house appeared around a curve in the road, set back from the water behind a stand of birch trees that had gone golden with the season. It was smaller than Ryan had expected, a single-story cottage with weathered blue siding and a wraparound porch, the kind of place that had probably been in Veronica's family for generations. Not ostentatious, just real. Veronica's car was already in the gravel driveway. As Ryan pulled in beside it, the front door opened and she emerged wearing jeans and a soft gray sweater, her hair down and loose in a way he'd never seen at the office. Without the armor of her business suits and severe styling, she looked younger, more uncertain, more like the woman from the photograph. Emma unbuckled herself and climbed out of the car with characteristic enthusiasm. "Is this your house? It's pretty. Do you have a lake? Can I see it? Daddy said there would be a lake." Veronica's surprised laugh was genuine. "Yes, to all of those. You must be Emma." "I'm 4 3/4, Emma announced with the precision of someone for whom fractions of years mattered deeply. "And I'm an excellent ballet dancer, and I know all my colors, even the hard ones like chartreuse." "Chartreuse is very hard," Veronica agreed seriously. "I'm impressed." Ryan grabbed their bag from the trunk, feeling the strangeness of these two parts of his life intersecting. His fierce, brilliant daughter, and the woman who'd somehow pulled him out of invisibility and into something that felt increasingly like friendship, though neither of them had quite named it that way. "Sorry," he said to Veronica. She's enthusiastic about new places. "Don't apologize. It's refreshing." Veronica knelt down to Emma's eye level. "Would you like to see the dock? It's the best part of the house." Emma looked at Ryan for permission. He nodded, and she immediately took Veronica's offered hand with the fearless trust of a child who'd been taught the world was generally safe and people were generally kind. They walked around the cottage to where the land sloped down to the water. The lake stretched out before them, mirror smooth in the still morning air, reflecting the blazing trees along the opposite shore. A wooden dock extended into the water, weathered gray by years of sun and rain and winter ice. Emma gasped. "It's beautiful." "It is," Veronica said softly, and Ryan heard something break in her voice. Recognition, perhaps, or grief for all the time she'd stayed away from this place. Emma released Veronica's hand and ran toward the dock, stopping just at the edge where wood met earth. She turned back with a question on her face. "You can go on it," Veronica called. "Just be careful." Emma ventured onto the dock with small, careful steps, testing each board like she was navigating a bridge over a canyon. When she reached the end, she sat down exactly as the woman in the photograph had sat, legs dangling, feet hovering above the water, and looked out at the lake with an expression of such pure contentment that Ryan felt his throat tighten. Veronica stood beside him, watching Emma. "She's wonderful." "She's everything," Ryan said simply. "You're lucky to have her." "I know. Even on the hard days when I'm running on 3 hours of sleep and she's decided that dinner is an elaborate negotiation. I know." They walked down to the dock together, sitting on the edge a few feet from Emma, who was now conducting an extensive investigation of something in the water that might have been a fish or might have been a leaf. "I haven't been here since the week after my father's funeral," Veronica said quietly. "I kept meaning to come back, but there was always another crisis, another deadline, another reason to stay in the city. Eventually, it became easier to avoid it entirely than to face what being here meant." "What does it mean?" Veronica was silent for a long moment, her gaze on the lake. "That I had a life before I became the CEO. That I made choices that cost me something I didn't fully understand I was losing. That the woman in that photograph was happy in a way I haven't been in 3 years, and I don't know if I can find my way back to her." Emma had lost interest in the water mystery and was now carefully examining the dock boards, running her small fingers along the grain of the wood. "Miss Veronica, why is the water so quiet?" "There's no wind today," Veronica explained. "When the air is still, the lake becomes like a mirror." "A mirror that shows trees and sky instead of faces," Emma observed with the philosophical precision that Ryan had come to expect from her. "That's magic." "It is a little bit magic," Veronica agreed, and Ryan saw her smile, not the controlled professional expression she wore in meetings, but something genuine and unguarded. They spent the morning exploring the property. Veronica showed them the tire swing her father had hung from an oak tree when she was 8, the small shed where she used to keep her fishing gear, the stone fire pit where her family had roasted marshmallows on summer evenings. Each revelation felt like a gift, a piece of herself that she'd kept locked away and was now cautiously sharing. Emma collected leaves with single-minded determination, creating what she called a rainbow pile, organized by color gradations that only she could perceive. Ryan watched her work while Veronica started a fire in the pit, arranging kindling with practiced efficiency. "You're good at that," he observed. "My father insisted I learn to do things myself. No calling the groundskeeper when something needed fixing. No hiring people to solve problems I could solve on my own." She struck a match, holding it to the kindling until flames began to catch. "I think he was preparing me to run the company, even back then, teaching me self-sufficiency." "Did you want to run it, even before he died?" Veronica sat back on her heels, watching the fire grow. "I wanted to make him proud. I wanted to prove I was capable of more than people expected. But I'm not sure I understood what it would cost. The isolation, the constant scrutiny, the way people stop seeing you as a person and start seeing you as a resource, something to be managed or exploited or feared." "That's what you told me I'd been doing," Ryan said, "making myself invisible to avoid that kind of scrutiny. And I told you I'd become untouchable to avoid being hurt. Turns out we were both wrong. Invisibility and untouchability are just different versions of loneliness." Emma returned with her arms full of leaves, dumping them triumphantly at Veronica's feet. "Look, I got every color. Well, except chartreuse. I don't think leaves come in chartreuse." "That's a very scientific observation," Veronica said seriously. "Have you considered a career in botany?" Emma looked at Ryan. "What's botany?" "The study of plants." "Oh, then yes, I've considered it very much, starting now." They made sandwiches for lunch, simple things from the provisions Veronica had brought, eaten on the porch while Emma constructed elaborate stories about the lives of the squirrels that chattered in the nearby trees. The normalcy of it was startling. No discussion of quarterly projections or board politics or pilot programs, just sandwiches and stories and the sound of wind moving through autumn leaves. After lunch, Emma announced she was tired and needed a nap, something she never admitted to without extreme exhaustion. Ryan settled her on the couch inside the cottage, covering her with a soft blanket that smelled like cedar and old summers. She was asleep within minutes, one hand still clutching a particularly excellent red leaf. Veronica had moved to the dock, sitting at the edge with her feet in the water exactly as she had in the photograph. Ryan joined her, rolling up his jeans and letting the cold lake water envelop his ankles. "Thank you for inviting us," he said. "Thank you for coming. I wasn't sure I could face this place alone. Are you glad you came back?" Veronica looked out at the lake, at the trees burning with color, at the small cottage that held the ghost of who she'd been before everything changed. "I'm terrified. Being here makes me remember what I gave up, and I'm not sure if that makes me want to fight to get it back or if it just makes me sad for what's already lost." "Why can't it be both?" She turned to him with a small smile. "When did you become so wise?" "When I had a daughter who asks impossible questions and expects honest answers." Ryan kicked gently at the water, watching ripples spread. "Emma asked me once if I was happy. She was 3. I didn't know how to explain that happiness wasn't really the goal, that survival was the goal, that being there for her was the goal, that happiness was a luxury I couldn't afford to think about." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was happy when I was with her," which was true, but also incomplete. He paused. "These past 2 months, working on Groundswell, fighting for something that matters, I've realized that I'd forgotten what it felt like to be engaged with something beyond just making it through the day, to feel like my voice mattered, to be seen. And now that you've been seen, was it worth the risk?" Ryan thought about the anonymous threats, the confrontation with Richard Moss, the impossible choices between work and Emma's recital. "Ask me again when we know if the pilot program succeeds, when we know if you keep your job and I keep mine." That's not an answer. Yes, it is. It's the honest answer. I don't know yet if the cost will be worth it, but I know that going back to being invisible isn't an option anymore. Even if everything falls apart, I can't know what it feels like to matter. Veronica reached over and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. It was the second time they'd touched outside of professional contexts, and Ryan felt the weight of it. Not romantic exactly, though there was an intimacy to it that made his heart beat faster. More like the touch of fellow travelers who'd found each other on a difficult road and were choosing to keep walking together. "I went to see my mother last week," Veronica said after a while. "First time in 4 months. I told her about Groundswell, about the board fight, about how close I came to losing everything." "What did she say?" "She asked if I was happy, just like Emma asked you." Veronica's laugh was soft and sad. "I didn't have a good answer either, but she told me something I've been thinking about ever since. She said my father built the company, but he also built a family. That he understood success wasn't just about profit margins and market share. It was about creating something that made people's lives better, including his own. Do you think he'd approve of what you're doing now?" "I think he'd be terrified, but I also think he'd understand why I have to try." She squeezed Ryan's hand. "I'm tired of being the person who chooses safety over truth, the person who's forgotten how to sit by a lake." They sat in comfortable silence, feet dangling in cold water, hands linked, while the afternoon sun moved across the sky and painted everything gold. Emma emerged from her nap around 3 o'clock, disoriented and slightly cranky until Veronica offered to teach her how to skip stones. They spent an hour at the water's edge, Veronica demonstrating the proper technique, while Emma hurled rocks with more enthusiasm than accuracy, celebrating each attempt regardless of how many times it skipped. Ryan watched from the dock, his heart full of something he couldn't quite name. This moment, his daughter laughing with a woman who'd been a stranger 2 months ago, the lake reflecting clouds and sky, the cottage standing solid behind them, felt impossibly fragile and impossibly important. His phone buzzed. A text from Patricia. "Emergency. Richard Moss filed a formal complaint claiming hostile work environment and targeted harassment. Board wants meeting Monday morning. This is bad." Ryan's stomach dropped. He showed the message to Veronica when Emma was occupied with finding the perfect skipping stone. Her expression hardened. "He's fighting back, trying to discredit us before the pilot program even starts." "What do we do?" "We gather documentation. Every safety violation he's ignored, every complaint he's suppressed, every piece of evidence that shows he's the one creating a hostile environment." She looked at the lake, at Emma, at the life she'd been trying to reclaim for one afternoon. "We were never going to get to keep this easily." "I'm sorry. We should go. Let you prepare." "No!" Veronica's voice was firm. "We have until Monday. That's 36 hours. Right now, in this moment, We're here. We're human. We're remembering what matters. She called to Emma. Want to help me make dinner? Emma abandoned her stone collection with the enthusiasm of someone who considered cooking a grand adventure. They moved to the cottage's small kitchen where Veronica somehow produced ingredients for pasta and salad from her apparently well-stocked provisions. Emma insisted on helping with everything, which meant the simple meal took twice as long and involved far more flour on the floor than was strictly necessary. But watching Veronica patiently guide Emma's small hands through stirring sauce, listening to them discuss the relative merits of different pasta shapes with absolute seriousness, Ryan felt something shift in his chest. This was what had been missing from both their lives. Not romance. Though he couldn't deny the pull he felt toward Veronica grew stronger every time she laughed at Emma's observations or showed genuine interest in a 4-year-old's extensive theories about why spaghetti was superior to penne. But more than that, connection. The simple human pleasure of sharing space and time in small tasks with people who saw you clearly and chose your company anyway. They ate dinner on the porch as the sun set over the lake, painting the water in shades of orange and pink and purple. Emma talked almost non-stop, weaving elaborate stories about the fish who lived in the lake and the adventures they had when humans weren't watching. And then the biggest fish, his name is Gerald, he decides to explore the deep part where it's dark and scary, but he's brave, so he goes anyway, and he finds a treasure chest full of shiny rocks and brings them back to share with all his friends. That's a good story, Veronica said. Gerald sounds very brave. He is, but he's also scared sometimes. Daddy says being brave means doing things even when you're scared. Your daddy is right. Veronica met Ryan's eyes across the table. Being brave is terrifying. After dinner, they built a fire in the pit and roasted marshmallows while the stars emerged overhead, more stars than Ryan ever saw in the city, whole constellations visible without the interference of streetlights and skyscrapers. Emma fell asleep in his lap around 9, sticky with marshmallow residue, her breathing deep and even. Veronica added another log to the fire, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. I haven't done this in years, just sat by a fire and watched the stars. It's nice, Ryan said simply, adjusting his hold on Emma so she wouldn't slide off his lap. It's terrifying, Veronica corrected. Being still, having time to think about what I've lost, what I'm risking, whether any of it will matter in the end. You think too much. Occupational hazard of being a CEO. Everything's a strategic calculation, every choice mapped to potential outcomes. What if you just chose what felt right instead of what made strategic sense? Veronica looked at him across the fire, her face half in shadow, half illuminated by flames. Then I'd be sitting by this lake every weekend instead of in an office fighting battles I'm not sure I can win. I'd call my mother more. I'd remember what it feels like to be a person instead of a position. She paused. I'd probably spend more time with people like you. People like me? People who tell the truth, who see me clearly and don't run away from what they see. Her voice dropped lower. I'd admit that these past 2 months, the best parts of my days have been the mornings when I know we're meeting, when I get to have conversations that matter with someone who isn't trying to manage or manipulate me. Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs. Veronica, I'm not saying this to make things complicated, she interrupted quickly. I know you have Emma. I know your life is already impossibly full. I know this. Whatever this is between us exists in a strange space where professional and personal are all tangled up. But I needed you to know that you've changed something for me. Made me want to be someone who deserves the honesty you've shown me. Ryan looked down at his sleeping daughter, then back at Veronica. You already are that person. You just forgot for a while. And you reminded me. You reminded me too. That being invisible wasn't protecting me. It was just making me disappear. They sat in the firelight while Emma slept and the lake whispered against the shore and the stars wheeled overhead in their ancient patterns. When the fire had burned down to embers and the cold had started to seep in, Ryan carried Emma to the car, buckling her carefully into her seat while she murmured something about Gerald, the fish, and treasure chests. Veronica walked him to the driver's side, hugging herself against the chill. Thank you for today, for bringing Emma, for being here. Thank you for inviting us, for sharing this place. They stood awkwardly for a moment, aware of all the things that could be said and the reasons not to say them. Finally, Veronica reached out and hugged him, quick and fierce and over almost before it began. "We'll fight them on Monday," she said. "Richard Moss and the board, and everyone who wants to keep things exactly as they are. And maybe we'll win, or maybe we'll lose, but at least we'll do it honestly." "Together," Ryan added. "Together." The drive home was quiet, Emma sleeping in the back seat, the dark road illuminated only by headlights, and the occasional house set back from the highway. Ryan thought about the day, about watching Veronica remember who she'd been, about his daughter collecting leaves and asking impossible questions and falling asleep sticky with marshmallow. He thought about the complaint Richard Moss had filed, about the board meeting on Monday, about all the ways this fragile thing they were building could shatter. But mostly, he thought about Veronica's words, that the best parts of her days were the mornings when she knew they'd meet, that he'd changed something for her, made her want to be someone different than who she'd become. The feeling was mutual in ways he was only beginning to understand. His phone rang as he pulled into his apartment complex, Veronica's name on the screen. "I just wanted to make sure you got home safe," she said. "We're here." Emma didn't even wake up when I carried her inside. "Good. That's good." A pause. "Ryan, what I said earlier about the best parts of my days, I know, me too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." Ryan looked at his darkened apartment building, at the life he'd carefully constructed from survival and routine and fierce devotion to his daughter. "These past 2 months, working with you, fighting for something that matters, it's reminded me that I'm more than just Emma's dad, that I have value beyond taking care of her, that being seen doesn't have to mean being destroyed." "We're both learning that," Veronica said softly. "Monday's going to be hard. Monday's going to be brutal, but we'll handle it." "Together," Ryan repeated. "Together." After they hung up, Ryan sat in his car for a long moment before gathering Emma and heading inside. He put her to bed without waking her, pulling the blanket up to her chin and smoothing her hair back from her forehead. She'd asked him once if he was happy. He still didn't have a perfect answer, but he had something better. He had hope. Hope that fighting for truth mattered, that being seen was worth the risk, that the woman who'd forgotten how to sit by a lake and the man who'd chosen invisibility were both finding their way toward something real. Sunday passed in a blur of preparation. Ryan reviewed documentation while Emma played, his laptop balanced on the coffee table while she built elaborate structures from blocks and narrated the dramas unfolding in her imaginary city. Patricia sent files throughout the day, safety reports Richard had buried, employee complaints he'd dismissed, incident logs that showed a pattern of prioritizing production numbers over worker welfare. The evidence was damning, but Ryan knew that didn't guarantee anything. Richard had allies, relationships, 22 years of loyalty that would be hard to overcome with mere facts. Veronica called Sunday evening after Emma was in bed. "Are you ready?" she asked. "No, you?" "Terrified. But I keep thinking about what you told Emma, that being brave means doing the thing anyway. She's smarter than both of us." "She is." Veronica's voice softened. "Ryan, I need to tell you something. If tomorrow goes badly, if the board sides with Richard, don't. Let me finish. If it goes badly, I want you to know that bringing you into this wasn't a mistake, that these 2 months have mattered more than any quarterly report or strategic victory, that you helped me remember who I wanted to be, even if I don't get the chance to become her." Ryan felt his throat tighten. "It's not going to go badly. We have evidence. We have truth. We have each other," Veronica interrupted. "And that's enough. Whatever happens tomorrow, knowing that you'll be in that room fighting alongside me, it's enough." Monday morning arrived too quickly and not quickly enough. Ryan dropped Emma at preschool, holding her a moment longer than usual. "Big meeting today?" she asked, reading him with the perceptiveness of a child who'd learned to monitor her parents' moods. "Very big." "Then you should be extra brave." "I'll try." "And Daddy?" She cupped his face in her small hands. "Even if the meeting is scary, you're still the best daddy. That doesn't change." Ryan kissed her forehead, blinking back unexpected tears. "I love you, philosopher." "Love you too. Now go be brave." The executive conference room was packed when Ryan arrived. Not just the board members, but HR representatives, legal counsel, and Richard Moss himself sitting across the table with an expression of calculated confidence. Veronica was already seated at the head of the table, her posture perfect, her expression unreadable. She met Ryan's eyes as he entered, and something passed between them. Recognition, solidarity, the shared understanding that they were about to fight a battle that would determine far more than just their jobs. Chairman Morrison called the meeting to order with clinical efficiency. Mr. Moss has filed a formal complaint alleging that the Groundswell Initiative constitutes targeted harassment designed to force his resignation in retaliation for legitimate management decisions. These are serious allegations that, if substantiated, would represent a significant failure of leadership. His gaze landed on Veronica. Ms. Sloan, you have the floor to respond. Veronica stood, and Ryan watched her transform into the CEO who commanded rooms and built empires. Thank you, Chairman Morrison. I'll be direct. Mr. Moss's complaint is an attempt to obscure his own pattern of misconduct by attacking the very initiative designed to address systemic problems he's helped create. She pulled up the first document on the screen, a safety report from 14 months ago detailing equipment failures in manufacturing. This report was filed by 3 separate employees documenting the same issue. Recommend immediate equipment replacement. Mr. Moss's response was to reassign all 3 employees to different shifts and proceed with no repairs. Richard leaned forward. That equipment was still within operational parameters. The employees were being alarmist. 4 months later, that equipment failed during operation, Veronica continued, advancing to the next slide. One worker suffered a severe hand injury requiring surgery. The incident investigation found that the failure was entirely preventable with proper maintenance. The settlement cost the company $240,000. The human cost is incalculable. She continued methodically through the evidence. Complaint after complaint that Richard had suppressed, safety violations he'd ignored, employees who'd been punished for speaking up. The pattern was undeniable, but Richard had come prepared. He presented his own evidence, production numbers that had increased under his leadership, efficiency metrics that showed his department exceeding targets, testimonials from supervisors who praised his decisive management style. The question before this board, Richard said smoothly, is whether we prioritize feelings or results. I understand that some employees are uncomfortable with high-performance standards, but coddling workers who can't meet expectations isn't compassion. It's a recipe for mediocrity. Ryan felt anger rise in his chest. Before he could stop himself, he stood. May I respond to that? Morrison looked surprised, but nodded. Mr. Cole. Ryan moved to stand beside Veronica, drawing strength from her presence. Mr. Moss is presenting a false choice. This isn't about feelings versus results. It's about sustainable performance versus short-term metrics that destroy long-term value. He pulled up his own data, the turnover analysis, the replacement costs, the productivity losses from constantly training new workers to replace experienced ones who'd left. Mr. Moss's department has the highest turnover in the company, 68% in the last 18 months. Every time someone leaves, we lose institutional knowledge, efficiency, and continuity. The cost of that turnover exceeds his productivity gains by a factor of 3. People leave jobs, Richard countered. That's normal attrition. People leave hostile environments where they don't feel safe, valued, or heard, Ryan shot back. And they take their expertise with them. You're not managing for excellence, Mr. Moss. You're managing for compliance through fear, and in the long run, that destroys the very results you claim to prioritize. The room fell silent. Morrison looked at Veronica. Ms. Sloan, what are you proposing? Veronica didn't hesitate. Mr. Moss should be placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. If the investigation confirms what we've documented, his employment should be terminated, not as retaliation, but as accountability for a documented pattern of misconduct that's cost this company money, talent, and integrity. That's outrageous, Richard began, but Morrison raised a hand. The board will deliberate. All parties are dismissed except board members. Ryan and Veronica gathered their materials in silence and left the room. They made it to her office before either spoke. We did everything we could, Veronica said quietly. Will it be enough? I don't know. They waited for 3 hours. Ryan tried to work, tried to focus on email and routine tasks, but his mind kept circling back to that conference room, to Richard's confident smirk, to the very real possibility that truth wouldn't matter as much as relationships and tenure and the comfortable corruption of systems that had always worked this way. His phone rang at 2:17 p.m. Morrison's assistant requesting they both return to the conference room. They walked side by side through the executive level, neither speaking, both knowing that the next 10 minutes would determine whether their fight for change had meant anything or whether they just made themselves expendable by challenging people with more power. The board members' expressions were unreadable as Ryan and Veronica took their seats. Morrison cleared his throat. The board has reached a decision. Regarding Mr. Moss, we find the evidence of misconduct compelling enough to warrant a full independent investigation. He will be placed on immediate administrative leave. Depending on the investigation's findings, termination is a likely outcome. Ryan felt Veronica's hand find his under the table, squeezing tight. Regarding the Groundswell initiative, Morrison continued, the board approves expansion of the pilot program to include all departments, with full implementation pending 6-month results. Ms. Sloan will retain her position as CEO, with the understanding that this initiative's success is directly tied to her continued leadership. It wasn't everything, but it was enough. It was more than enough. Thank you, Veronica said, her voice steady despite the emotion Ryan could see flickering in her eyes. After the board members filed out, after the conference room emptied, Ryan and Veronica sat alone in the sudden quiet. We did it, she said, almost disbelieving. You did it. You stood up to 22 years of entrenched power, and you won. We won. This was never just me, Ryan. It was David finding the courage to speak honestly, Patricia gathering data, you showing up to that board meeting and refusing to let them reduce human beings to efficiency metrics. She turned to face him fully. We won because we chose to be seen, together. Ryan thought about Emma's words that morning, that even if the meeting was scary, he was still the best daddy, that some things didn't change, but other things did. He'd walked into that conference room as an invisible IT technician. He was leaving as someone whose voice had mattered, whose truth had changed something real. I need to pick up Emma, he said, checking his watch. Of course, go. Veronica smiled. Tell her that her daddy was very brave today. Tell yourself the same thing. Ryan left the office as the afternoon sun was slanting through the windows, painting everything gold. He picked up Emma from preschool and took her to the park, pushing her on the swings while she shrieked with laughter and demanded higher, higher, not scared at all. His phone buzzed with a message from Veronica. I'm going back to the lake next weekend, just wanted you to know. Choosing to be the person who sits by lakes instead of the person who runs empires, or maybe trying to figure out how to be both. Ryan typed back with one hand while steadying Emma's swing with the other. Good. You deserve to remember what that feels like. And for what it's worth, I think you can be both. The person by the lake and the person who changes things. They're not as different as you think. Her response came quickly. Thank you for everything, for seeing me, for not letting me hide, for being brave enough to be seen yourself. Emma called for him to watch her jump off the swing, and Ryan put away his phone to give her his full attention. But part of his mind stayed with Veronica's words, with the strange and wonderful truth that being seen, really seen, by another person could change everything. That night, after Emma was asleep, Ryan stood at his apartment window looking out at the city. Somewhere out there, Veronica was doing the same thing, both of them thinking about lake houses and board meetings and the narrow space between who they'd been and who they were becoming. They'd won a battle today. Not the war. There would be more fights, more resistance, more people who preferred the comfortable corruption of the old ways. But they'd proven something important. That honesty mattered, that being seen was worth the risk, that two people from impossibly different worlds could find each other in the space between invisibility and exposure, and together build something real. Ryan sent one more message before bed. Same time Wednesday morning? Veronica's response made him smile. I'll be there. We have work to do. They had work to do, and the work turned out to be both harder and more rewarding than either of them had anticipated. The expansion of Groundswell from a pilot program to a company-wide initiative meant more meetings, more resistance, more late nights spent reviewing data and refining proposals. But it also meant something Ryan had never experienced in his professional life, the sense that what he did during the day mattered beyond just collecting a paycheck. The first real test came 3 weeks after the board decision, when David brought a manufacturing worker named Maria Santos to one of their morning sessions. She was in her late 40s with tired eyes and hands that bore the calluses of decades on a factory floor. She sat across from Veronica with visible discomfort, clearly uncertain whether speaking to the CEO directly would help or hurt her. "Tell her what you told me," David encouraged gently. Maria looked at her hands. "The new supervisor, the one they brought in after Mr. Moss left, he's better. He listens. But the equipment is still old, still breaking down. We've filed 3 maintenance requests in the past month and nothing's happened. It's like the paperwork just disappears into some system and nobody reads it." Veronica leaned forward, her expression intent. "What specifically needs to be fixed?" "The conveyor belt in Station 7 stutters every few hours. You have to manually reset it, which means stopping production. The ventilation in the coding room hasn't worked properly in 6 months. The fumes make people dizzy by end of shift. And the safety guards on the cutters are loose on 3 machines. We've been reporting it, but—" She trailed off with a shrug that said more than words could, the resignation of someone who'd learned that speaking up rarely changed anything. Ryan watched Veronica's face harden with determination. "Give me the maintenance request numbers. I want to know exactly where these requests are getting stuck." By the end of the day, they'd traced the problem to a middle manager in facilities who'd been systematically deprioritizing manufacturing maintenance requests to stay under budget. Within a week, the equipment was repaired, the manager was reassigned, and Maria Santos had become an unofficial advisor to the groundswell team, bringing other workers to sessions and helping bridge the gap between executive intentions and ground-level realities. "This is what it looks like when it works," Veronica said to Ryan after one particularly productive session where they'd identified and solved 3 separate systemic issues in under 2 hours. "People feeling safe enough to speak truth, and leadership actually listening." "Don't get too comfortable," Ryan cautioned. "We've picked the low-hanging fruit. The deeper we go, the more entrenched the resistance will be." He was right. By month 2 of the expanded program, the pushback intensified. Anonymous complaints about the initiative started appearing in the employee feedback system. Concerns that groundswell was creating a culture of complaining, that productivity was suffering because workers spent too much time in meetings, that the company was coddling underperformers instead of maintaining high standards. Patricia traced several of the complaints to a small group of mid-level managers who'd been allies of Richard Moss, people who saw the initiative as a threat to their authority and were actively working to undermine it. "We need to address this head-on," Veronica said during an emergency task force meeting. "If we let this narrative take hold, that listening to employees equals lowering standards, we lose everything." "Town halls," Patricia suggested. "Give people a chance to see the actual results instead of just rumors?" Veronica looked at Ryan. "What do you think?" Ryan considered it carefully. Town halls could backfire spectacularly if they weren't managed right, but they could also be exactly what was needed, a way to make the abstract concept of cultural change into something concrete and human. "I think we do it," he said finally, "but not traditional town halls where executives talk at people from a stage. We need something different, more like listening sessions where we hear concerns and respond honestly, even when the answers aren't easy." They scheduled the first session for the following week in the manufacturing facility. Neutral territory, away from executive offices, on ground-level workers' home turf. Veronica insisted on minimal structure, just her, Ryan, David, and Patricia sitting in a circle of chairs with whoever showed up, no podium, no presentations, just conversation. Ryan spent the night before the session, unable to sleep, running through scenarios in his head. What if nobody came? What if everyone came but only to complain? What if they asked questions he couldn't answer, made accusations he couldn't refute? Emma found him at the kitchen table at 2 a.m., staring at his laptop without really seeing it. "Can't sleep?" she asked, dragging her stuffed giraffe behind her. "Sorry, sweetheart. Did I wake you?" "No, I had a dream about flying and then I woke up and wanted to tell you, but you weren't in bed." She climbed into his lap, fitting herself against his chest in the way she'd done since she was a baby. "Are you worried about work?" "A little bit." "Is it the big meeting?" Ryan had told her about the listening session in the vague terms he used for work matters, enough that she understood it was important, not so much that she'd worry. Yeah, the big meeting. Emma was quiet for a moment, her small fingers playing with the collar of his shirt. Daddy, do you like your job now? The question caught him off guard. What do you mean? Before, when I asked about work, you always looked tired. Now you look scared sometimes, but also happy. So I wondered if you like it now. Ryan held her closer, marveling at her perceptiveness. I do like it now. It's harder and scarier, but it matters more. Does that make sense? Like how ballet is hard, but I still like it, because when I do a good spin, it feels special? Exactly like that. She nodded against his chest. Then the big meeting will be okay, because you're doing good spins. Ryan carried her back to bed, tucking her in with an extra kiss to the forehead. Her faith in him was both humbling and terrifying. This small person who believed he could do hard things simply because he was her father, because in her world, parents were capable of anything. He hoped she was right. The manufacturing facility's break room had been cleared of tables and set up with concentric circles of chairs, about 80 seats total. Ryan arrived early with Veronica to find workers already filtering in, some curious, some skeptical, all clearly uncertain what to expect. Maria Santos had helped spread word about the session, and Ryan spotted her near the front, giving him an encouraging nod. David was there with several other managers who'd bought into the groundswell vision. Patricia had her tablet ready to take notes, documenting everything so they could follow up on specific issues. By the scheduled start time, nearly every seat was filled. Veronica stood, not at the center of the circle, but as part of it, just another person in a chair. Thank you all for coming. I know trust has to be earned, and I know we've asked you to believe in change when you've seen too many initiatives that promised everything and delivered nothing. So I'm not going to make speeches or promises today. I'm just going to listen. And then I'm going to tell you honestly what we can fix, what we can't fix, and what we're willing to fight for. The first 15 minutes were awkward, people glancing at each other, waiting for someone else to speak first, testing whether this was genuine or just theater. Then a young woman in the third row raised her hand hesitantly. I've worked in packaging for 3 years. Every performance review, I get told I'm doing great. But when I asked about advancement opportunities, my supervisor said there weren't any positions available. That was 18 months ago. Since then, they've hired 2 external candidates for supervisor roles without ever posting them internally. How is that fair? Veronica didn't deflect or make excuses. It's not fair. And it's exactly the kind of practice we're trying to change. Can you give me your name and department details? I want to look into this specifically. The woman did, and something shifted in the room. Other hands started going up. A maintenance worker talked about submitting the same safety concern for 6 months, with no response until Groundswell suddenly made it a priority. Why did it take a CEO initiative for basic safety to matter? An IT technician, one of Ryan's former colleagues, described feeling invisible for years, only noticed when something broke, never consulted about systemic improvements, even though he had ideas that could save the company money and time. A customer service representative explained how the metric she was evaluated on incentivized rushing customers off the phone rather than actually solving their problems, creating a system where doing her job well meant failing her performance reviews. Veronica listened to each concern with complete focus, occasionally asking clarifying questions, never dismissing or minimizing. Ryan found himself doing the same, recognizing his own experience in many of their stories. The frustration of being unseen, unheard, treated as a resource rather than a person. Then a man in the back row stood up, his expression hostile. Ryan recognized him, one of the managers Patricia had identified as actively undermining Groundswell. This is all very touching, the man said with evident sarcasm. But let's be honest about what this really is. You're creating a culture where people complain instead of work, where feelings matter more than results. I've been with this company for 15 years, and the reason we've been successful is because we maintain high standards. You start catering to every person who thinks their job is too hard, and we'll lose our competitive edge. The room went very quiet. Ryan felt tension spike, people shifting in their seats, uncertain how Veronica would respond to such direct confrontation. Veronica stood slowly, her expression calm. What's your name? David Brennan, logistics manager. Mr. Brennan, Thank you for your honesty. I appreciate directness, even when I disagree with it. She paused. You're right that maintaining high standards is essential. Where you're wrong is in thinking that listening to employees is incompatible with excellence. In fact, the opposite is true. She pulled out her phone, calling up data they'd compiled. Since we started Groundswell, productivity in departments with active participation is up 9%. Turnover is down 32%. Quality control issues have dropped by 18%. Those aren't feelings. Those are results. Better results than we were getting when we ignored people's concerns and just demanded performance. That's short term, Brennan countered. Wait until... It's been 4 months, Veronica interrupted, and every trend line is moving in the right direction. But let me ask you something, Mr. Brennan. In your 15 years here, how many good people have you seen leave because they felt undervalued? How many problems could have been solved earlier if someone had listened to the people closest to the work? How many injuries or mistakes or losses could have been prevented if speaking up wasn't considered complaining? Brennan didn't answer, his jaw tight. I'm not asking you to agree with this approach, Veronica continued. I'm asking you to give it a genuine chance. And if you can't do that, if you truly believe that treating people with dignity is incompatible with success, then maybe you need to ask yourself if this is still the right company for you. The room stayed silent for a long moment. Then Maria Santos stood. I want to say something. I've worked in manufacturing for 23 years. I've seen managers come and go, seen initiatives start and stop, seen promises made and broken. And I was skeptical about this too. Thought it was just another way for executives to look good without changing anything real. She looked directly at Veronica. But you've been showing up. Not just to meetings, but to the floor. You learned my name. You fixed the equipment we'd been asking about for months. You fired the manager who was making our lives miserable and replaced him with someone who actually listens. She turned to address the whole room. Maybe this won't last. Maybe it'll fall apart like everything else. But right now, for the first time in 2 decades, I feel like someone with power actually cares whether I'm safe, whether I'm valued, whether my work matters. And that's worth fighting for. Several people nodded. A few started clapping, and the applause spread until most of the room was participating. Brennan stood frozen for a moment, then walked out without another word. After the session ended, after most people had filtered back to their shifts, Ryan found Veronica standing alone near the windows overlooking the manufacturing floor. That was hard, she said quietly. That was necessary. And you handled it perfectly. Did I? I basically told a 15-year employee to quit if he didn't like how I run things. You told him the truth, that this company is changing and people can either change with it or move on. Ryan moved to stand beside her. You can't make everyone happy, Veronica. Some people are too invested in the old way of doing things. I know. It's just, she sighed. My father used to say that leadership meant making hard choices. I always thought he meant choices about strategy or finances. I didn't realize how hard it would be to choose between people. To acknowledge that building the culture we want means some people won't have a place in it. Ryan thought about his own hard choices over the past months. The evenings away from Emma, the risks to his career security, the constant uncertainty about whether fighting for change would ultimately help or hurt the people he loved. Emma asked me last night if I liked my job now, he said. She noticed that I used to always look tired, but now I look scared sometimes, but also happy. Are you? Happy? I'm terrified most of the time. But yeah, I'm also happy in a way I haven't been in years. Because what I'm doing matters. Because I'm not invisible anymore. Because I wake up thinking about how to solve real problems instead of just surviving another day. He paused. Is that how you feel? Veronica was quiet for a long moment, watching the manufacturing floor below where people were returning to their stations, their work, their lives that had been invisibly supporting the company's success for years. I went back to the lake house last weekend, she said finally. Spent the whole day there. Sat on the dock, went for a walk in the woods, made dinner in that tiny kitchen. And for the first time since my father died, I felt like myself. Not the CEO, not the person managing crises and fighting battles, just me. That's good. That's important. The strange thing is, I kept thinking about work. Not in the obsessive way I used to, where it consumed everything, but wondering what Maria would think about the sunset, or whether Emma would like the way the leaves look when they fall on the water. Thinking about the listening session, about your face when that technician talked about feeling invisible. She turned to look at him. The lake house used to be an escape from my real life. Now it feels like it's part of the same thing, like maybe I don't have to choose between being the person by the lake and being the person who changes things. You don't, Ryan said softly. They're both you. They always were. I'm starting to believe that. She smiled, and it reached her eyes in a way that reminded him of the photograph, of the woman who'd been happy before she learned to be untouchable. Thank you for that, for helping me see it. The weeks that followed the listening session brought gradual but measurable change. More workers started showing up to groundswell meetings. More managers began to engage with the initiative instead of resisting it. The anonymous complaints didn't disappear entirely, but they were increasingly outnumbered by positive feedback and concrete suggestions for improvement. Ryan found his role evolving from task force member to something more like a translator, someone who could speak both the language of ground-level workers and executive strategy, who could help each side understand the other. It was exhausting work, but it was his work in a way that fixing computers had never been. Emma noticed the change in him too. She started asking more questions about his job, wanting to understand what made him come home energized some days and depleted others. Ryan tried to explain it in terms she could grasp, about helping people feel heard, about making work better for everyone, about choosing bravery even when it was scary. Like Gerald the fish exploring the deep part? She asked one evening while they were making dinner together. Ryan smiled, remembering the story she'd told at the lake house. Exactly like Gerald. And Miss Veronica is helping you explore? We're helping each other. Emma considered this seriously while stirring the pasta sauce with intense concentration. I like Miss Veronica. She's nice, and she listens good, and she knows about chartreuse. She does listen well, Ryan agreed, his chest tight with affection for this small person who'd somehow understood something essential about Veronica that many adults missed. Are you friends now? The question was simple, but the answer was complicated. Were they friends? They'd gone far beyond professional colleagues, sharing vulnerabilities and truths that felt increasingly intimate. But calling it friendship seemed insufficient for the way Veronica's texts could make his heart beat faster, the way her presence in a room changed the quality of the air, the way he'd started thinking of his days in terms of before and after their morning meetings. Yeah, he said finally, because it was true even if it was incomplete. We're friends. Good. Everyone needs friends. That Saturday, Veronica invited them back to the lake house. It had become an irregular but treasured routine. Every few weeks when schedules allowed, they'd make the drive north and spend a day remembering what it felt like to be human instead of just functional. This visit fell on a perfect October afternoon, the trees at peak color, the air crisp enough for sweaters but warm enough for Emma to play outside without a coat. She'd brought her collection of special rocks from the city, explaining to Veronica in great detail why each one was unique and important. This one is special because it's smooth, but also has sparkles. And this one is special because it's shaped like a heart if you look at it the right way. And this one is special because I found it the day Daddy told me I was brave. Veronica examined each rock with the same seriousness Emma brought to the presentation. You have excellent taste in rocks. Very discerning. What's discerning? It means you know quality when you see it. Emma beamed, adding this new word to her growing vocabulary of concepts she was still figuring out. They spent the afternoon exploring the woods behind the cottage, Emma narrating an elaborate adventure story where they were explorers searching for treasure. Veronica played along with surprising enthusiasm, suggesting plot developments and character motivations that made Emma shriek with delight. Ryan walked slightly behind them, watching his daughter and this woman who'd somehow become essential to both their lives, and felt something settle in his chest that he'd been afraid to name. After Emma had tired herself out and fallen asleep on the cottage couch, Ryan and Veronica sat on the porch with coffee, watching the sun paint the lake in shades of amber and gold. I got an offer this week, Veronica said quietly. A board seat at a Fortune 500 company. Very prestigious, very generous compensation. Would require stepping down as CEO here and moving to New York. Ryan's stomach dropped. Are you considering it? 6 months ago, I would have said yes immediately. It's the kind of opportunity people build entire careers hoping for. She sipped her coffee. Now I'm not sure what I want anymore. What changed? This. All of this. She gestured vaguely at the lake, the cottage, perhaps the entirety of the past 5 months. I've spent 3 years building a version of success that looked impressive from the outside but felt empty from the inside. Now I'm finally building something that feels real, a company culture that values people, relationships that aren't purely transactional, a life that includes lake houses and 4-year-olds who collect special rocks. She looked at him. Walking away from that for a bigger title and a higher salary feels like losing something I can't afford to lose twice. Ryan understood what she wasn't quite saying, that the choice wasn't just about career trajectory, but about what kind of person she wanted to be, what kind of life she wanted to build. What did you tell them? He asked. That I needed time to think about it. They want an answer by the end of the month. That's 3 weeks. I know. She set down her coffee cup. Can I ask you something? If I did take it, if I left, would you stay? Keep fighting for groundswell with whatever CEO comes next? Ryan had to think about that. His entire participation in the initiative was built on Veronica's vision, her willingness to risk everything for meaningful change. Without her, would the new leadership maintain that commitment? Or would groundswell slowly get watered down, compromised away, until it was just another failed initiative that sounded good but changed nothing? I don't know, he said honestly. Depends on who they brought in, whether they actually believed in what we're building or just saw it as a PR program to improve employee satisfaction scores. He paused. But I think the real question is whether you'd regret leaving. Not for career reasons, but for everything else. Would you regret walking away from the chance to finish what you started here? Veronica stared out at the lake for a long moment. I would. I'd regret it every time I sat in a boardroom discussing quarterly reports with people who see workers as line items. Every time I had a conversation that was carefully strategic instead of genuinely honest. Every time I remembered what it felt like to fight for something that mattered and chose the safer path instead. Then I think you have your answer. It's not that simple. The board seat is a real opportunity. Turning it down means staying in a position where I have enemies, where every decision gets scrutinized, where one bad quarter could end my tenure as CEO anyway. But it also means finishing what you started, proving that companies can be both profitable and humane, showing that the woman by the lake and the woman who changes things are the same person. Ryan met her eyes. It means not running away from the hard thing just because it's hard. Veronica laughed softly. You sound like Emma, telling me to be brave like Gerald the fish. Emma's usually right about these things. They sat in comfortable silence while the sun finished setting and the first stars began to emerge. Inside the cottage, Emma shifted in her sleep, murmuring something about treasure and sparkly rocks. I'm going to turn it down, Veronica said finally. The board seat. I'm going to stay here and keep fighting, even though it's terrifying and uncertain and I might fail spectacularly. You might succeed spectacularly too. I might. She turned to him with an expression he couldn't quite read. Ryan, I need to tell you something. These past months, working with you, building this friendship, or whatever it is we're building, it's been the best part of every day. Not just because you're helping me change the company, but because you see me. The real me, not the position or the potential or the performance. Just me. Ryan's heart hammered against his ribs. I see you because you let yourself be seen. You let me in when you could have stayed untouchable. I let you in because you made it safe. Because you showed up to that first meeting and told me the truth instead of what you thought I wanted to hear. Because you keep choosing honesty even when it costs you something. She paused, seeming to gather courage. I don't know what this is between us. I don't know if it's just friendship or something more or something that doesn't have a name yet. But I know I don't want to lose it. And I know that going to New York would mean losing it, because whatever we're building here requires proximity and time in showing up. Ryan thought about Emma asleep inside, about the life he'd carefully constructed around her needs and his responsibilities. He thought about the risk of complicating things further, of crossing lines that maybe shouldn't be crossed between a CEO and an employee, however much their relationship had evolved beyond those roles. But he also thought about Veronica's question from months ago. What did invisibility cost him? And he realized that staying safely undefined, refusing to name what was growing between them, was just another version of choosing invisibility over truth. I don't know what this is either, he said carefully, but I know that you've become essential to my life in ways that have nothing to do with work. I know that I think about you when I'm with Emma, wanting to share moments with you. I know that your texts make me smile, that planning our lake house visits has become something I look forward to all week, that watching you remember how to be human again has been one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. But, Veronica prompted gently, hearing the hesitation in his voice, but I have Emma, and she has to come first, always. I can't risk her stability, her security, for something that might not work out. She's already lost one parent who decided she wasn't worth staying for. I won't put her through that again. I would never ask you to put me before Emma, Veronica said firmly. Never. She's the most important person in your life, and she should be. But Ryan, I'm not asking you to choose between us. I'm asking if there's room in your life for both, for being an amazing father and also being someone who has relationships, connections, possibilities beyond just parenting. I don't know if I know how to do that. For 3 years, it's just been me and Emma against the world. Adding someone else, it's terrifying. Everything worth doing is terrifying, Veronica said with a small smile. You taught me that. Emma chose that moment to appear in the doorway, rubbing her eyes and dragging her giraffe. Daddy, is it time to go home? Ryan stood, moving to scoop her up. Not yet, sweetheart. Just talking with Miss Veronica. Did you have a good nap? I dreamed about the lake, and there were fish made of stars. She rested her head on Ryan's shoulder, still half asleep. Can we come back here again? Do you want to? Veronica asked. Emma lifted her head to look at Veronica seriously. Yes, because it's magic here, and you're happy here, and Daddy's happy here, and everyone should be happy. Everyone should be happy, Veronica echoed softly. You're very wise, Emma. I know. Emma yawned enormously. Can I have hot chocolate? They made hot chocolate together in the cottage's small kitchen, Emma conducting the operation with great seriousness, explaining to Veronica the exact ratio of chocolate to milk that Daddy always got right. The domestic simplicity of it. 3 people making hot chocolate, chatting about nothing important, existing together in easy comfort, felt both ordinary and precious. On the drive home, with Emma asleep in the back seat and the dark road unwinding before them, Ryan thought about Veronica's question. Was there room in his life for both Emma and something more? He'd been operating for so long on the assumption that being a good father meant sacrificing everything else, that any attention or energy he gave to someone else was attention stolen from his daughter. But watching Emma and Veronica together today, the easy affection, the genuine delight they took in each other's company, he wondered if maybe he'd been wrong. Maybe showing Emma what healthy adult relationships looked like was part of being a good father. Maybe teaching her that it was possible to be fully present for the people you loved without disappearing into obligation was actually more valuable than martyring himself on the altar of perfect single parenthood. He called Veronica when he got home, after Emma was in bed. I've been thinking, he said without preamble, about what you said, about whether there's room. And I think there might be. If we're careful, if we're honest, if we promise that Emma's well-being is always the priority, and we never do anything that would hurt her. I can promise that, Veronica said quietly. Easily. Because I care about her too. And I care about you. And I want whatever this becomes to be something that adds to your lives, not something that disrupts them. Then maybe we try, slowly, see where it goes. I'd like that. He could hear the smile in her voice. I'd like that a lot. The next month brought changes subtle and profound. Groundswell's 6-month evaluation showed results that exceeded even Veronica's optimistic projections. Productivity up, turnover down, employee satisfaction scores at a 5-year high. The board approved full implementation across all divisions, and Morrison grudgingly admitted that the initiative had proven its value. Ryan's role formalized into a newly created position, Director of Employee Experience, with a salary that made his old IT wages look laughable and responsibilities that terrified and energized him in equal measure. He still left at 5 o'clock to pick up Emma, but now he had a team beneath him, people who could handle evening emergencies, coverage that meant he could be fully present for his daughter without constantly worrying about dropped balls at work. Emma started kindergarten that fall, and Veronica showed up to her first day of school breakfast, sitting at the tiny cafeteria table and listening to Emma's detailed analysis of why the alphabet should be reorganized to put all the best letters first. Ryan watched them together, his fierce, brilliant daughter, and this woman who'd gone from untouchable CEO to someone who showed up for kindergarten breakfasts, and felt his chest expand with an emotion he'd been afraid to name. It wasn't just love, though love was definitely part of it. It was recognition. The understanding that somehow, accidentally, they'd built something real from pieces that shouldn't have fit together. A single father and a CEO. A man choosing visibility and a woman remembering humanity. Two people who'd been lonely in different ways finding each other and deciding to be brave together. The first time Veronica stayed for dinner at Ryan's apartment, nothing fancy, just spaghetti and salad, and Emma's running commentary on everything she'd learned that day, felt monumentous and ordinary all at once. Emma accepted Veronica's presence with the easy adaptability of children, treating her like a natural extension of their small family rather than an intrusion into their established routines. "Miss Veronica, do you know how to play Candyland?" Emma asked after dinner, already pulling out the board game. "I used to, but I might be rusty." "That's okay. I'll teach you the rules. They're very complicated." Ryan did dishes while they played, listening to Emma patiently explaining strategy to a woman who probably negotiated billion-dollar deals with the same focus she brought to advancing her plastic gingerbread man along the rainbow path. When Veronica lost, almost certainly on purpose, Emma was gracious in victory, consoling her with the wisdom that losing was how you learn to be better next time. After Emma was in bed, Ryan and Veronica sat on the small balcony with coffee, looking out at the city lights spreading below them like a circuit board. "Thank you for today," Veronica said, "for letting me be part of this. Thank you for wanting to be. I know it's not glamorous, kindergarten breakfast and Candyland and chicken nuggets shaped like dinosaurs. It's perfect. It's real." She reached over and took his hand, and Ryan laced his fingers through hers, marveling at how natural it felt. "I've spent 3 years at the top of a tower making decisions that affected thousands of people, and I've never felt as useful as I did today, helping Emma sound out words in her new reading book. You're a natural. I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll disappoint Emma, or you, or both of you. That I'll be so busy trying to be what you need that I'll lose sight of who I actually am." Ryan squeezed her hand. "Then we communicate. We're honest. We remember that the whole reason this works is because we've never pretended to be anything other than exactly who we are. Scared and trying anyway." "Exactly." 6 months into their careful, honest, sometimes terrifying relationship, Veronica made a decision that surprised everyone, including herself. She announced to the board that she was stepping back from day-to-day operations to focus on long-term strategy and culture development, promoting her COO to CEO and taking the role of executive chair herself. "I realized I was doing it again," she explained to Ryan the night before the announcement. "Trying to be everything, make every decision, carry every burden. That's not sustainable and it's not necessary. I have good people. They don't need me micromanaging them. They need me supporting them and making sure we never lose sight of why we're doing this." "That's very wise," Ryan said. "Also terrifying for a control freak like you." "So terrifying, but also right." She smiled. "Besides, this way I have more time for kindergarten breakfasts and Candyland tournaments. Turns out those matter more than I expected." The new structure gave Veronica something she'd never had: balance. Time to go to the lake house regularly, to show up for Emma's school events, to have conversations with Ryan that weren't squeezed into early mornings before the office filled up. Time to remember who she was beyond the position, to integrate the woman by the lake with the woman who changed systems, to discover that they'd always been the same person waiting to be whole. Emma's 6th birthday party happened at the lake house in the spring, a gathering of her kindergarten friends and their parents, chaos and laughter, and a cake shaped like a giraffe that Veronica had insisted on making from scratch despite having no baking experience. The cake was lopsided and the frosting was uneven, but Emma declared it the best cake in the history of cakes, and gave Veronica a hug that lasted long enough to make Ryan's eyes sting with unexpected tears. Later, after the guests had left and Emma was down by the water with Ryan skipping stones, Maria Santos approached Veronica with a small gift bag. "I wanted to thank you," Maria said. "When you started Groundswell, I didn't believe anything would really change. But my daughter starts college this fall, first person in our family to go. She's using the scholarship money from the new education benefit program you implemented. That's life-changing for us. So thank you for actually caring, for making it real." Veronica accepted the gift, a framed photograph of Maria's daughter at graduation, beaming with pride and possibility, and felt something break open in her chest. This was success. Not quarterly earnings or board seats or magazine covers, but a young woman going to college because systems changed, because people spoke up, because someone with power chose to listen. "Thank you for trusting us," Veronica said, her voice thick, "for believing it was worth trying." That evening, after Emma had been picked up by Mrs. Chen for a sleepover so Ryan and Veronica could have some rare time alone, they sat on the dock watching the sunset paint the water in impossible colors. "Do you remember the first time we sat here?" Veronica asked. "When you brought Emma and I was so nervous about whether I could do this, be the person from the photograph again. I remember. You were terrified. I'm still terrified. Every day I'm scared I'll mess up this relationship, or fail Emma, or make the wrong call at work, or lose everything we've built." She turned to look at him. "But I'm also happy. Really, genuinely happy in a way I didn't think I'd ever feel again." Ryan pulled her closer, and she leaned against him, fitting into the space beneath his arm like she'd been designed for it. "I'm happy too, and terrified. Turns out they're not mutually exclusive." Emma was right about that. Remember? When she said being brave means doing things even when you're scared? She's usually right. It's both inspiring and slightly annoying. Veronica laughed, and the sound was pure and unguarded and exactly like the woman in the photograph, the one who'd been happy before she learned to be untouchable, who was learning to be happy again now that she'd remembered how to be vulnerable. "I love you," she said suddenly. "I've been trying to find the right moment to say it, but maybe there isn't a right moment. Maybe you just say it when it's true." Ryan's heart stuttered and soared. "I love you too. Have for a while now. I just didn't know how to say it without making it complicated. Everything worth having is complicated. That's very wise. I learned it from a single father who fixed my computer and accidentally changed my life." They sat together as the sun finished setting and the stars emerged one by one. Two people who'd been invisible and untouchable learning to be seen and vulnerable together. Behind them, the cottage stood solid and welcoming, full of memories and promises, and the life they were carefully, honestly building from truth and bravery and the willingness to choose each other every day. A year later, Ryan stood in the same spot on the dock, but this time he wasn't alone. Emma was beside him in a pale blue dress she'd chosen because it matched the lake, practicing walking in small, careful steps while clutching a basket of flower petals. Behind them, folding chairs had been arranged on the lawn. Not many, just close friends and family, the people who mattered. Veronica appeared from the cottage with her mother, wearing a simple white dress and carrying wildflowers she'd picked that morning. She caught Ryan's eye and smiled. Not the controlled CEO smile, not the professional expression she wore in meetings, but the genuine, unguarded joy of someone who'd found their way back to themselves and found love in the process. Emma tugged on Ryan's sleeve. "Daddy, is it time for me to throw the flowers?" "Almost, sweetheart, when the music starts." "And then you and Miss Veronica get married?" "Then we get married. And she'll be my family for real? Not just my friend who I love?" Ryan knelt down to her level, smoothing a strand of hair behind her ear. "She's already your family, Em. Has been for a long time. This is just the day we celebrated officially." Emma considered this seriously, then nodded. "Okay, that's good. Because I love her very much and I want her to stay forever." "Me too, philosopher, me too." The ceremony was simple. No elaborate speeches, just honest promises exchanged on a dock where Veronica had learned to sit by lakes again, where Ryan had learned that being seen didn't have to mean being destroyed, where both of them had discovered that choosing truth over safety was terrifying and necessary and worth it. When it was over, when they'd been pronounced married and Emma had thrown flower petals with enthusiastic abandon and everyone was gathering by the cottage for cake and celebration, Ryan and Veronica stood alone for a moment on the dock, hands linked, looking out at the water that had witnessed so much of their journey. "Are you happy?" Veronica asked, echoing Emma's question from years ago. "I'm terrified and happy. Best possible combination." "Good answer." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Thank you for seeing me, for not letting me stay invisible behind my position, for teaching me that being untouchable just meant being alone." "Thank you for the same, for pulling me out of invisibility, for making me believe my voice mattered, for showing Emma what it looks like when people choose bravery together." From the cottage, Emma's voice called out, "Daddy! Miss Veronica! Mrs. Chen says we have to cut the cake before it melts." They turned toward the sound of her voice. Their daughter, fierce and brilliant and teaching them daily about courage and honesty and love. Behind her, the cottage stood solid. The trees blazed with summer green, and friends gathered to celebrate the strange and beautiful thing they'd built from one accidental glimpse, one honest answer, one choice to be seen. Veronica squeezed Ryan's hand. "Ready?" "Always." They walked up from the dock together, leaving behind the people they'd been, invisible and untouchable, and stepping fully into who they'd become. Not perfect, not without fear, but real, seen, choosing each other, and truth and bravery every single day. The photo someone took that afternoon, Ryan and Veronica and Emma on the dock, laughing at something completely present and unguarded, would sit on Veronica's desk for years to come, not hidden in a folder somewhere, not something to be ashamed of or nostalgic for. Just proof that people could change, that being seen was worth the risk, that sometimes fixing someone's computer could lead to fixing two broken hearts and building a family from honesty and hope, and that the woman by the lake and the woman who changed the world were, and always had been, the same person. She just needed someone brave enough to tell her the truth.